Chapter 17:10. As soon as she said that, Elder Yu's eyes turned cold. This young lady looked weak, but he didn't expect her to be so rude. She actually called Shangguan a B*T directly? Just as he was about to reprimand him, Yizhao suddenly glanced at him without batting an eyelid and stopped him. Elder Yu choked and his Adam's apple bobbed a few times. In the end, he swallowed his words. The undercurrent between the two of them was very subtle, and Nan Yi didn't notice it. However, Nan Yifan saw all of this. He couldn't understand Yizhao and Nan Yifan's expressions, but when he thought of their previous reactions, he couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Weren't they here to look for their clansmen? Why did they suddenly say that they were looking for Shangguan Yu now? He didn't know what Shangguan Yu's relationship with them, but it was a little rash for Nan Yi to speak like this. He slightly emphasized his tone, hinting at a reminder. Nan Yi glanced at him, but didn't take his warning to heart. It seemed that father still didn't know that Shangguan Yu had contracted a crimson gold sky phoenix, right? Father, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. She carelessly gave him a word of advice before turning her head away. Nan Yifan wanted to say something, but seeing the subtle atmosphere, he shut his mouth in the end. Yizhao looked at Nan Yi from head to toe. His gaze was substantial and carried a heavy pressure. Nan Yi couldn't help but feel timid. Just when she almost couldn't take it anymore, Yizhao finally retracted his gaze. Only then did Nan Yi feel relieved. That's right. Yizhao was still expressionless and unfathomable. I'm indeed looking for her. Hearing his affirmative answer, Nan Yi was even more convinced of her previous guess. He must have found out about that contracted fiend, so he came all the way here. For a moment, Nan Yi felt smug and regretful. She was smug because after offending the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Shangguan Yu was definitely doomed. Unfortunately, she seemed to still be trapped in that black wall until now, and no one knew if she was dead or alive. If Shangguan Yu was already dead inside, wouldn't she not be able to see her being tortured? She felt that it was a pity. She sighed and said, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. The only thing I can be sure of now is that she's still there. But I don't know if she's alive or dead, or if she can come out in the end. Yizhao furrowed his brows quickly. Actually, this result was within his expectations. Previously, you said that everything was Shangguan Yu's fault? What's going on? Tell me in detail. Yizhao's tone was calm and indifferent, yet it was noble and arrogant, and it caused others to unconsciously feel reverence and submission. Nan Yi loosened and tightened her grip. This matter, we have to start from a few days ago. After that, Nan Yi told him everything that had happened over the past few days. Of course, she ignored the few times she provoked them, and took the initiative to find trouble with them. She emphasized how Shangguan Yu was rude, and attacked them forcefully. The most important thing was that Shangguan Yu tried to kill her, but in the end, everyone was swallowed by the black wall. According to her, everything seemed to be caused by Shangguan Yu. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even mention Rongxiu's name. When outsiders heard this, they would naturally think that Shangguan Yu was an arrogant, domineering, unreasonable, selfish, and ruthless person. She was also the one who put everyone in a life-and-death situation. Elder Yu couldn't continue listening after hearing a few sentences. It wasn't like he hadn't interacted with that girl before. Nan Yi's words were obviously not trustworthy. He didn't know how Shangguan Yu had offended her. She was actually trying so hard to smear their name. It was as if she couldn't wait to kill them forever. Could it be that it was just because they were all swallowed by the black wall? That's it. After Nan Yi finished speaking, she glanced at Yizhao carefully. Unfortunately, Yizhao's expression didn't change. Nan Yi couldn't guess what he was thinking at this time. On the other hand, Nan Yifan and the others were shocked by her words. You're saying that Shangguan Yu contracted a crimson gold heavenly phoenix? Nan Yi nodded. I don't know what method Shangguan Yu used, and that crimson gold heavenly phoenix is very obedient to her. Nan Yifan frowned. Since it's a contracted divine beast, it's normal. No wonder Nan Yi dared to say so earlier. There was such a shocking secret behind it. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was an ancient divine beast, and had always been extremely arrogant. They didn't even bother to interact with humans, let alone contract. This was undoubtedly a stain on their entire race. It was no wonder that Yi Zhao would take action personally. He was so nervous previously, because he was looking for the contracted crimson gold heavenly phoenix. But Nanny suddenly thought of something and spoke hesitantly. There seems to be something wrong with that crimson gold heavenly phoenix. She can already transform into a human form, but she looks only 3 or 4 years old. Oh, Nan Yifan couldn't help but be shocked. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan could only transform into a human form after reaching adulthood, right? How could such a situation happen? In that case, that Shangguanyu did use some special method? He was puzzled and looked at Yi Zhao and Elder Yu inquisitively. Unfortunately, the other party was more thoughtful and unpredictable than him. Nan Yifan couldn't tell what they were thinking at this time. How did you come out? Yi Zhao suddenly asked. Nanny had already thought of an answer, but there was still some panic and fear on her face. At that time, I was walking inside when I suddenly felt the surrounding space start to squeeze crazily. After some time, a strong force came. When I opened my eyes again, I found that I was already out. In other words, she didn't know what was going on either. Yourself? Elder Yu, who had been silent all this time, spoke. Nanny hesitated for a moment. Yes. Elder Yu smiled meaningfully. That second Miss Nan is really amazing. She can actually walk around freely in there with the strength of a transcendent god. As far as I know, it seems to be quite dangerous inside, right? If second Miss Nan encountered that situation, then the others should be the same. But now, only second Miss Nan came out alone. She is really amazing. Nanny suddenly felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. She could only smile awkwardly. Actually, I was just a little lucky. Buzz. A roar came from the black wall again. Everyone looked up and saw another figure falling out of the hole. Nanny's heart instantly jumped to her throat. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:11. That person looked up. A face full of bloodstains entered everyone's eyes. However, Nanny's heart instantly calmed down. Yuxing. Nan Yifan was the first to react. He shouted and immediately rushed over to help him up. Not only was Nan Yuxing's face covered in blood, but his clothes were also soaked in blood. His eyes were tightly shut, and his breathing was weak. It was obvious that he had fainted. The thick smell of blood covered the sky and shrouded the earth. Nan Yifan was extremely anxious. Yuxing! Yuxing! Wake up! Nan Yuxing's eyelids seemed to move, but he still couldn't open his eyes. Nan Yi and the 2 elders also rushed over at this time. Patriarch, please allow me to take eldest young master's pulse first. One of the elders said respectfully. Nan Yifan woke up and hurriedly stepped aside. Yes, yes. Jin He, you do it. Elder Jin He stepped forward and placed his fingers on Nan Yuxing's wrist. After a moment, his expression suddenly changed. A strong sense of uneasiness surged in Nan Yifan's heart. Jin He, how is it? Elder Jin He seemed to be in disbelief as he took the pulse again. However, the result was the same this time. He was silent for a while before he retracted his hand. He sighed and cupped his hands at Nan Yifan. Patriarch, eldest young master's pearl of essence has shattered. What? Nan Yifan's mind went blank, and his figure suddenly staggered. Father! Nan Yi hurriedly went forward to support him, and couldn't help but look at Elder Jin He. Eldest brother is extremely powerful. How could his pearl of essence have shattered? Elder Jin He, are you sure you're not mistaken? Elder Jin He said helplessly. If Patriarch and second Miss don't believe me, you can check it yourself. Jin He didn't dare to say such things. Everyone knew that Nan Yuxing was the next patriarch of the Nan family. The shattering of his pearl of essence meant that he would be a cripple from now on. Then, he would definitely not be able to become the patriarch in this life. If he hadn't confirmed it repeatedly, Elder Jin He wouldn't have dared to say this. Nanny was speechless. Her chest seemed to be blocked by something, and she felt suffocated. She turned her neck stiffly and looked at Nan Yuxing. At this moment, Nan Yuxing finally woke up. Big brother! Nanny pounced over. Nan Yuxing's vision was still blurry. But he no longer cared. He ignored Nan Yi and looked at Elder Jean He with a dazed expression as he asked, "What's wrong? What you said just now, is it true?" In fact, he had been awake for a long time, but he couldn't open his eyes. However, he could hear everything around him clearly. Naturally, Elder Jean He's words were included as well. Elder Jean He looked away and sighed. "Whether it's true or not, eldest young master, shouldn't you know best?" That was his core of essence. It was the source of his cultivation. Now that his origin core had shattered, all of the origin power in his body was rapidly escaping out of his body. How could he not feel it? Nan Yuxing's face was expressionless. After a long while, the corners of his mouth twitched with difficulty. That's true. In fact, he had felt it long ago, but he still didn't dare to believe it. From the moment he was born, he was a proud son of heaven. Who would have thought that one day, his core of essence would shatter, and he would become a cripple? To him, Nan Yifan, and Nan Yi who were present, this was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue. "Big brother!" Nan Yi hugged him and cried. However, Nan Yuxing didn't have any reaction. He stared blankly at the void for a long time before he closed his eyes. He originally thought that he would die in there, but who knew that coming out would be even worse than death? Nan Yifan clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white, and the veins on his forehead bulged. "Jean He, help him deal with his injuries first." Nan Yifan looked calm and composed, but his voice was already hoarse. He had high hopes for Nan Yuxing, and this was undoubtedly a wake-up call. However, he definitely couldn't break down in front of so many people. He couldn't even show too much abnormality. Elder Jean He responded, and began to treat Nan Yuxing's injuries. His condition was much more serious than Nan Yi's. In addition to external injuries, internal injuries were even more difficult to treat. His core of essence had shattered. It was really fortunate that he was able to survive. Of course, Nan Yuxing obviously didn't want this fortune himself. He closed his eyes and his face was ashen. It was obvious that he no longer had any motivation to live. Elder Jean He was a little anxious, and whispered to Nan Yi, "Second miss, eldest young master has no intention of living. I'm afraid it won't be good if this continues." Nan Yi wiped away her tears. Actually, if she was Big Brother, she probably didn't want to live anymore. But she couldn't just watch Big Brother die like this. She took a deep breath and leaned closer. "Big Brother, we haven't taken revenge yet. You must persevere. Don't you want to see what will happen to that B*TCH who reduced us to such a state?" Nan Yi gritted her teeth as she said these words. Every word carried a deep hatred and resentment that couldn't be dispelled. She blamed all of this on that one person. At the same time, she pointed all the spearheads at that person. Finally, those words managed to move Nan Yuxing. With great difficulty, he slowly opened his eyes. His originally lifeless and despairing eyes were gradually filled with deep hatred. That's right. All of this was that Sheng Guanyu's fault. If it wasn't for her, they wouldn't have been involved in that, and he wouldn't have become like this. His entire life had been ruined by the other party. Where is she?" Nan Yuxing gritted his teeth and spat out a few words. It was as if as long as Chu Luyue appeared in front of him now, he would immediately suck her blood and eat her flesh. Nan Yi cooperated with Elder Jean He to treat his injuries while comforting him. "Big brother, she hasn't come out yet. But since we've all come out, she will definitely come out too. When the time comes, we'll settle this score with her properly." Nan Yuxing held his breath. You're right, he had to live. He had to watch them suffer with his own eyes. With the support of this thought, Nan Yuxing actually managed to endure it. Everyone fell silent and began to wait. Who else would come out next? Elder Yu glanced at Nan Yuxing with a serious expression. He wasn't worried about Nan Yuxing, but, judging from Nan Yuxing's injuries, the situation inside was probably not optimistic. Moreover, 2 people from the Nan family had already come out, but Dumpling and the rest were still nowhere to be seen. He looked at Yi Zhao and realized that Yi Zhao was staring at the black wall with a strange expression. He was about to ask something when he suddenly heard Yi Zhao shout, "Step back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network." Chapter 1712. Elder Yizhao didn't even think, before he tapped the tip of his foot on the ground and flashed backwards. Immediately after, a ripple suddenly rose from the black wall. Whoosh, like a surging river wave surging. The surrounding heaven and earth energy seemed to be affected by this force, and started to surge. The huge totem on the wall suddenly spun faster. A violent and majestic aura surged out from it. Nan Yifan and the rest were the first to bear the brunt. They didn't even have time to set up a barrier before they were enveloped by the terrifying force. Under the impact of this power, the figures of several people instantly flew out uncontrollably. In a hurry, Nan Yifan hurriedly pulled Nan Yuxing. But before he could pull him, he missed. Bang! They fell to the ground one after another. Nan Yuxing's chest shook, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Yuxing! Big brother! Nan Yifan and the rest struggled to get up. Seeing this scene, they were almost scared out of their wits. But at this moment, a few figures rushed out from the black wall. Nan Yifan saw the two people in front clearly. Elder Wu Peng, Elder Bai Tong. He had just helped Nan Yuxing up, and was about to go over when he suddenly heard a crisp sound. Crack. Something seemed to have broken. Nan Yifan suddenly thought of something, and his eyes widened. He quickly took out a jade token. Of the 4 light spots inside, there were now only 3. Among them, the one that belonged to Elder Bai Tong had broken. Elder Bai Tong was dead. He sucked in a cold breath. The remaining 2 elders hurried over. Elder Wu Peng, how are you? Although Elder Wu Peng was still conscious, his face and body were stained with blood, and his breath was weak. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. Elder Jean he immediately helped him treat his injuries. The other elder came to Elder Bai Tong's side, and realized that he was no longer breathing. He looked at Nan Yifan in panic. Family head Elder Bai Tong. Nan Yifan closed his eyes and waved his hand. That elder immediately understood what he meant. With a heavy heart, he moved Elder Bai Tong's body to the side, preparing to bring it back for burial. Nan Yifan glanced out of the corner of his eye, and saw that a section of Elder Bai Tong's calf had been cut off. He frowned. Elder Bai Tong's leg. What's going on? It doesn't look like a recent injury. Nan Yi hesitated for a moment. She had only mentioned that Elder Bai Tong had been injured during the battle with Shang Guanyu, but she had not mentioned that his leg had been cut off by Rong Xiao. That is. Before she could explain, another figure fell out of the black wall. Nan Yi instinctively looked over, and her eyes lit up. Uncle Luoyan. The man who fell to the ground, and stood up with one hand supporting himself, was none other than Luoyan. Hearing this voice, Luoyan looked up. When he saw Nan Yi, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he turned his gaze and saw Nan Yifan and the others. It turned out that they had already arrived. Luoyan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and was about to walk towards them when he suddenly felt a chill all over his body. He immediately became alert. His entire body tensed up. At this moment, he realized that there were 2 men standing not far away from Nan Yifan and the others. They were burly and had unfamiliar faces. However, they were extremely strong. When he saw the appearance of the man standing in front of him, Luoyan suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed slightly. This person was Luoyan. Nan Yifan walked over and sized him up. After confirming that he had only suffered some minor injuries, he heaved a sigh of relief. At this point, all of their people had come out. Other than Elder Bai Tong, Elder Wu Peng and Nan Yuxing were both seriously injured. Nan Yi and Luoyan were in a slightly better condition, but they obviously needed a long time to recuperate. He wondered if there would be any side effects. Nan Yifan had mixed feelings. On one hand, he was glad that these people, except for Elder Bai Tong, had all come out alive. On the other hand, the battle was tragic and their injuries were serious. Especially Nan Yuxing, who had become a cripple. It was more painful for him than death. At the same time, it also made Nan Yifan's heart ache. Luoyan nodded. Patriarch, don't worry. I'm fine. He quickly scanned his surroundings, and basically determined what the situation was. He had known that it was extremely dangerous inside, so it was normal for such an outcome. Now his attention was more on the 2 unfamiliar men. Those 2 are Nan Yifan came back to his senses and said, "Oh, I almost forgot to introduce them to you. These two are Patriarch Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan." Luo Yin was shocked. He had already guessed that these two might be important figures in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. But he didn't expect that Yi Zhao, the patriarch, would also come. Suddenly he thought of something. Perhaps they came for the contracted Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix in Shengguanyu? Luo Yin suppressed the many thoughts in his heart and bowed politely. Yi Zhao frowned slightly. These people had all come out. But why wasn't there any movement from Dumpling and the rest? Seeing that Yi Zhao didn't pay much attention to him, Luo Yin wasn't angry. The other party was famous for his arrogance, so it was normal for him to have such an attitude. Besides, from the looks of it, he should still be waiting for the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix to come out, right? In fact, everyone present had such doubts in their hearts. Since both sides went in together, why was it that only Nan Yi and the rest came out, but the other party didn't come out at all? This made people think more about it. Nan Yifan thought for a moment and said, "Do you think Shengguanyu and the rest will still come out?" He hated the other party to the bone and couldn't wait to end their lives with his own hands. Nan Yi paused and sneered. "Who knows? Maybe they've already died in there." Chi. Two figures appeared almost at the same time. Nan Yi looked over and her heart sank. These two people were actually Nan Suhuai and Chu Ning. What was even more shocking was that other than a few sporadic wounds on their bodies, they were actually fine. From their expressions and state, it was obvious that they weren't injured much. Nan Yifan originally wanted to surround them immediately, but after seeing Nan Suhuai, he was stunned. Why was the dean of Lingxiao College here? At the same time, Nan Suhuai also noticed the strange atmosphere around him and looked over. Nan Yifan? He had actually brought people over. No, the point was that Nan Yi and the rest seemed to have come out before them. Looking around, Nan Suhuai didn't see the person he wanted to see and couldn't help but feel disappointed and worried. Suddenly his expression changed. "Clan leader Yi Zhao, why are you here?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1713. Nan Yi suddenly snorted. He actually had the cheek to ask this question? "President Nan, don't you know what your precious disciple has done? She must be tired of living to contract a crimson gold heavenly phoenix." Nan Suhuai was stunned. He guessed what Nan Yi was referring to, but wasn't this matter already resolved before? Rong Xiu had clearly sent a letter saying that Yuer had brought Dumpling out of Phoenix God Mountain safely. He had always thought that this matter had been satisfactorily resolved. Could it be that he had guessed wrongly? Yi Zhao said lightly, "I'm indeed here to look for Shengguanyu and Dumpling." Nan Suhuai's heart sank. What exactly was going on? If they didn't reach a satisfactory conclusion, Yi Zhao would never let them go, and even allowed them to leave with Dumpling. Why did he suddenly? Nan Suhuai took a closer look at him. Yi Zhao's expression was calm and nothing could be seen. For a moment he was a little nervous. If Yi Zhao was really here to cause trouble for them then. Elder Yi Yu's gaze landed on Chu Ning, and he was a little surprised. Nan Suhuai frowned. Elder Yi Yu's lips curled into a smile before he shifted his gaze away. This man must be the person Shengguanyu was looking for in the god-slaying tomb this time. According to what Nan Yi said, Shengguanyu called him daddy, so they must be father and daughter. He was just a stage 1 warrior, but he had a god realm. If he guessed correctly, he most likely had an indestructible divine body. Shengguanyu was already surprising enough, but he didn't expect her father to be just as extraordinary. This family was really... Nan Suhuai heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Elder Yi Yu had no intention of causing trouble for them. He turned to look at Chu Ning, only to find that the latter looked calm, as if she didn't take this matter to heart. Nan Suhuai couldn't help but lean closer and ask in a low voice, "Chu Ning, are you really not worried at all?" Chu Ning was stunned. "Worried? What are you worried about?" Nan Suhuai choked and shifted his gaze away. "Those two are the clan leader and the 5th elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan." Chu Ning nodded. "I know. And then, what was the point of asking then?" Nan Suhui almost couldn't breathe. Did Chu Ning not know how big of a trouble it was for you to contract a crimson gold heavenly phoenix in private? Dumpling. Chu Ning blinked. Looking at Nan Suhui's nervous expression, she suddenly understood something. Dean Nan, do you still not know? Boom. Before he could finish speaking, the sound of an intense collision of energy suddenly rang out. Everyone turned around and saw two figures, one in front and one behind, rushing out from the black wall. However, the person in front of him was illusory and translucent. It was actually just a soul. The person behind him was tall and sturdy. His face was piercingly cold, and his soul conduit realm battle intent surged. It was Shangguan Jing. From the looks of it, the two of them seemed to be fighting. Moreover, it was obvious that Shangguan Jing had the upper hand. That soul's aura was chaotic, and it was obvious that he couldn't hold on much longer. This scene shocked everyone present. Why did another soul suddenly appear? Senior. Nan Yi's eyes widened, and she couldn't help but blurt out. Nan Yifan immediately looked at her. You know that person? Nan Yi felt that she had said something wrong. At first, she thought that she was the only one who came out, so she skipped to the part where she met Yu Hongshan, who knew that the two of them were actually still alive, and they were fighting from inside to outside. At this moment Yu Hongshan, who was in a sorry state, also saw Nan Yi. Help me. He didn't even think about it before he shouted in a deep voice. Shangguan Jing was indeed powerful. Even though he had been cultivating hard for the past 1,000 years, he was still slightly inferior when it came to fighting. If this continued, he would definitely die in Shangguan Jing's hands today. Nan Yi gritted her teeth. Father, this senior helped me before. Let's help him now. It would be great if they could get rid of Shangguan Jing at the same time. When Nan Yifan heard this, he nodded without any hesitation. However, he had just taken a step when a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Nan Suhui. He said with a faint smile, Master Nan, are you going to attack Senior Shangguan Jing? Nan Yifan sneered. Why? Is Dean Nan planning to stop me? Senior Shangguan Jing is Yuer's ancestor, and is also a distinguished guest of our Lingxiao College. If he's in danger, there's no reason for us to sit back and do nothing. Although Nan Suhui was smiling, his eyes were very determined. Nan Yifan slowly clenched his fists. Dean Nan, are you really going to go against us for Shangguan Jing? Nan Suhui shrugged with a smile. Didn't your people already do that previously? Don't you think it's ridiculous to ask me this question now? His gaze landed on Nan Yi meaningfully. If it weren't for your daughter provoking us time and time again, and finding trouble with us, things wouldn't have developed to this extent. We haven't gone to find trouble with you yet, but you're planning to make a move on us first? Shangguan Jing was Yuer's Taizu, so they naturally had to protect him. Nan Yifan sneered when he heard this. It's clearly Shangguan Yu's fault, but now Dean Nan wants to falsely accuse her? You want to push all the blame onto my daughter? Nan Suhui raised his eyebrows. He already knew how Nan Yi explained to these people after she came out. Oh, Nan Suhui asked with interest. Nan Yi said that it's all Yuer's fault? She didn't need to say it. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell what's going on. There seemed to be magma surging wildly in Nan Yifan's chest, as if it would rush out in the next moment. Nan Yuxing was crippled, Elder Bai Tong was dead, and Nan Yi and Elder Wu Peng were seriously injured. This time, they could be said to have suffered heavy losses. Nan Yifan had a belly full of anger, and didn't know where to vent it. But Nan Suhui seemed indifferent to his agitated emotions. He smiled. Of course, Nan Yi would gloss over everything and describe everything in a way that was beneficial to her. And Nan Yifan doted on her so much, so he naturally believed her without a doubt. If there was no solid evidence, it was useless no matter how much others said. Seeing that Nan Suhui didn't speak, Nan Yifan thought that he was guilty and sneered. Why Dean Nan doesn't intend to continue? If you really have the confidence, why don't you confront me on the spot? Nan Suhui narrowed his eyes slightly. Confront? He was probably going to pester endlessly. Nan Yifan was even more certain of his guess. He raised his chin slightly and said coldly, If you don't dare to confront me, please step aside immediately. Just as he finished speaking, a clear and cold voice, like the sound of jade striking stone, suddenly sounded. I will confront you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:14. The voice was cold and calm, but it also carried a powerful pressure that made people dare not defy it. Everyone present could not help but look in the direction of the voice. On the black wall, the power around the huge totem suddenly surged. The void rippled with it. Then, a tall and slender figure walked out from it. The person who came was handsome and elegant. He was dressed in a snow-white robe, and he looked elegant. In an instant, everything in the surroundings seemed to dim in color. All the spiritual aura in the world seemed to converge on this one person. Everyone was silent for a moment. The man raised his eyes slightly, and a pair of eyes that were as deep as the sea quietly looked at the crowd. It was a very light look, but it was so dense that no one dared to look at it directly. When he first appeared, everyone thought he was like an immortal, but when they saw this pair of eyes, they were shocked to realize it was an illusion. Everything that happened before was just an illusion. This was not an immortal who flew down from the 9 mysterious heavens, but a devil who stepped on fire from hell. However, such a feeling was fleeting. Rong Xiu's eyes moved slightly, and that thick layer of bloody killing intent quietly dissipated. When they looked at him again, that pair of phoenix eyes had returned to their usual gentle, elegant, indifferent and distant look. Rong Xiu. Seeing the person who came, Nan Su Huai and Chu Ning were the first to react, and they both looked happy. Previously, they were still worried that he would not be able to come out safely. Now that they saw that he was safe and sound, and even his clothes were as spotless as usual, they immediately relaxed. He nodded slightly at Nan Su Huai and Chu Ning, indicating that he was fine. Then, he raised his eyes slightly and looked at Shengguan Jing and Yu Hongshan. Since he came out, the two of them had temporarily stopped fighting. Sensing Rong Xiu's cold gaze on him, Yu Hongshan's heart skipped a beat. Danger. Even Shengguan Jing did not cause such a strong sense of danger to him. Yu Hongshan's mind raced. This man called Rong Xiu looked to be in his early 20s, but his strength was unfathomable. Even he couldn't detect it. More importantly, out of so many people, only Rong Xiu came out unscathed. This made Yu Hongshan vigilant. Senior Shengguan, is this the person you mentioned before who betrayed you? Rong Xiu asked calmly. Shengguan Jing came back to his senses and nodded. He vaguely felt that there was something different about Rong Xiu, but he couldn't tell what it was. Rong Xiu nodded. Please do as you wish. He didn't expect this person to still be alive. However, this was also good. Shengguan Jing would be able to deal with him personally to take revenge for what happened back then. Don't worry. No one here will interfere with your matter. You can do whatever you want with him, Rong Xiu said calmly. Shengguan Jing's heart stirred slightly. He finally knew what was wrong. When Rong Xiu said these words, he was using a declarative sentence. His tone was too matter-of-fact, as if he didn't care about the objections of others at all. To put it bluntly, Rong Xiu's words were actually for everyone present to hear. This was an order. Shengguan Jing was secretly shocked. He knew that Rong Xiu had a noble status and had always been high and mighty. But apart from him, the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan, was also here today. The Nan family status was higher than Yuntian Towers. If he said this, Nan Yifan, Shengguan Jing subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan and was suddenly stunned. Why did Nan Yifan's reaction seem a little off? Nan Yi had also noticed this. After seeing Rong Xiu appear, her emotions were very complicated. Although all the previous twists and turns had already worn away most of her liking for Rong Xiu, it was very difficult for her to completely oppose Rong Xiu. But Rong Xiu obviously didn't take her seriously, and even came out to confront her. It would be a lie to say that Nan Yi didn't feel upset. At the same time, she was also angry. Hence, she finally decided to ask her father for help. Nan Yifan, Rong Xiu and the rest were extremely rude to her previously. Now that her father was here, let's see how they could still be arrogant? However, Nan Yifan didn't respond, even after Nan Yi shouted twice. Father? Father? She frowned strangely and tugged at Nan Yifan's sleeve. Only then did Nan Yifan come back to his senses and look at her with a stiff expression. What's wrong? Nan Yi frowned even more. What's wrong? Wasn't the situation already right in front of her? Father, are you all right? Nan Yi asked nervously. He had always been high-spirited, and she rarely saw him with such an expression. Why didn't you mention it before? Nan Yifan didn't finish speaking, but Nan Yi already understood. Was he talking about Rong Xiao? Nan Yi was about to defend herself when she suddenly remembered what Rong Xiao had said previously. Wait a minute. From the looks of it, her father and Rong Xiao really knew each other. Patriarch Nan, long time no see. Rong Xiao looked at Nan Yifan and said indifferently. Nan Yifan's expression instantly became subtle. His jaw tightened, and he squeezed out an extremely stiff smile. A long time no see. Successor. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the field instantly became even more strange. Almost everyone looked at Nan Yifan with a strange look in their eyes, especially the people from the Nan family. When they heard Nan Yifan call out the words successor so politely, it was as if they had seen a ghost. He was the patriarch of the Nan family. Whether it was status, experience, or strength, he was much higher than Rong Xiao. Why did it seem like he was the one who was more nervous and perturbed now? Nan Yi widened her eyes. Father. She knew her father too well. He would never be so polite to someone for no reason. In fact, there was even a hint of reverence and fear. Although Nan Yifan hid his emotions very well, Nan Yi, who was standing beside him, saw everything. Nan Yifan looked at her sternly. This girl actually skipped over such an important matter. If he had known that Rong Xiao was also involved, Nan Yi's heart turned cold from his gaze. No wonder. No wonder Rong Xiao directly guessed their identity and was so disdainful. They originally thought that he was pretending, but now, they were afraid that wasn't the case. But why did her father have to be so polite to a mere successor of Yuntian Tower? Nan Yi's heart was in turmoil. When she thought of the things that had happened before, she felt terrible. Nan Yifan couldn't be bothered with her as he forced a smile and cupped his hands at Rong Xiao. I didn't expect the successor to be here too. What a coincidence, haha. What a coincidence. Rong Xiao's eyes were cold, and his voice was indifferent. The Shangguanyu that you said you wanted to teach a lesson to is the mistress of Yuntian Tower. I's princess consort. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:15. Nan Yifan's mind buzzed. It was as if an invisible hammer had smashed him on the head, causing him to freeze on the spot. The matriarch of Yuntian Tower. That's right. He finally remembered why the name Shangguanyu sounded familiar. Wasn't that the princess whom Rong Xiao had personally appointed? This matter had spread like wildfire among the many aristocratic families in the Divine Ruins. However, the Nan family had never cared much about these things, and their subordinates would never mention it in front of him. He had only found out about it after inquiring about it in private. However, this matter had passed for a long time, and almost no one around him had mentioned it. Over time he had forgotten about it. That was why he didn't think of it when he heard the name Shangguanyu. Miscalculation. What a miscalculation. At this moment, Nan Yifan was so regretful that his intestines turned green. That was Rong Xiao's woman. Why did he have to take things so hard that he threatened to cause trouble for her? He even brought so many people from the Nan family to fall out with them. Look at these people. Among them, there was the father of Shangguanyu, the master of Shangguanyu, and the Taizu of Shanghaiyu. Offending them was undoubtedly offending Shangguanyu. Wasn't that the same as offending Rong Xiao? Nan Yifan finally couldn't laugh anymore. This time, even his stiff fake smile became very forced. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and spat out a few words with great difficulty. Misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Hey, didn't second Miss Nan just say that they were reduced to such a miserable state because of that Tishan Shangguanyu? In the almost suffocating silence, Elder Yu suddenly spoke. He blinked. Just now, the head of the Nan family seemed to have said that he wanted to avenge them. How did it suddenly become a misunderstanding? Yi Zhao glanced at him. After so many years, his bad habit of watching a show had not changed. However, this time, he was happy to watch the show. As soon as Elder Yu spoke, Nan Yifan had a bad premonition. After listening to him, he could only gnash his teeth in hatred. Why did this Yu just have to come out and stir up trouble at this time? If he didn't do it on purpose, then he must have seen a ghost. However, he could no longer be bothered to question Elder Yu. Instead, he immediately looked up at Rong Xiao. No, it's not like that. Therefore, meeting Rong Xiao's eyes, Nan Yifan's voice suddenly stopped. He felt as if his throat was being strangled by an invisible hand. The rest of his words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. That deep and cold gaze fell on her, chilling her to the bone. Oh. Rong Xiao's voice was light as he looked at Nanyi. Is what Elder Yu said true? Nanyi felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. She had never felt so clearly that she was only one step away from death. A terrifying pressure instantly enveloped her. It almost made her unable to breathe. Nan Yifan hurriedly took a step forward and stood in front of Nan Yi, as he hurriedly explained. Successor, it's not like that. Yi didn't say that. So, Elder Yi was lying in public and deceiving I? Rong Xiao's question made Nan Yifan speechless. Elder Yi crossed his arms and raised his chin. Patriarch Nan, aren't you being too mean by saying that? To think that I've been speaking up for you in front of the patriarch. Is this how you repay me? Nan Yifan wanted to tear his mouth apart. Who was the one being mean? Wasn't he the one who came out to stir up trouble first? And he even said that he spoke up for him in front of Yi Zhao. He didn't hear any of that. He only heard that he exposed Yi in public and put all of them in danger. Nan Yifan took a deep breath and forced himself to ignore Elder Yu. There are indeed many misunderstandings in today's matter. I can personally explain from the beginning. Father, he's just the successor of Yuntian Tower. Why do you have to be so polite? A voice full of unwillingness and anger suddenly sounded. It was Nan Yuxing. Everything was fine at first, but ever since Rong Xiao appeared, everything seemed to have suddenly changed. He really didn't understand why his father was so polite to Rong Xiao. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was in awe and fear. If it was any other time, Nan Yuxing would never ask this question. Anyone with a brain could see that there was something wrong with Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rong Xiao. However, Nan Yuxing had already lost his mind. He was seriously injured, and his mind was already a little muddled. When he saw this scene, he was instantly furious and burned the last string of reason in his heart. Thus, he suddenly shouted this sentence in a crazy manner. Yuxing. Nan Yifan was also stunned, and then endless anger surged in his heart. This unfilial son, does he know what he's saying? The situation was already difficult enough for him, and now that Nan Yuxing had interfered, the situation became even worse. Nan Yifan suddenly raised his hand and shouted sternly, You, come and apologize to the successor immediately. His words didn't serve as a warning to Nan Yuxing. Instead, it made him even crazier. Previously, when he was facing Rong Xiao, his attitude had always been high and mighty. Even if he wasn't a match for Rong Xiao, he actually didn't take Rong Xiao seriously. How could Yuntian Tower be compared to the Nan family? However, now, Nan Yifan was asking him to bow down to Rong Xiao? He would never agree. He's not worthy. Nan Yuxing straightened his neck and shouted. Slap. A loud and clear sound of a slap suddenly rang out. It was Nan Yifan, who gave him a hard slap across the air. Nan Yuxing's voice instantly disappeared. His cheek was slapped to one side, and it quickly became red and swollen. Nan Yifan was so angry that his chest violently rose and fell, and his palm was still trembling slightly. Eldest young master. The elders standing at the side were also stunned when they saw the situation. They only came back to their senses when they saw blood seeping out from the corner of Nan Yuxing's mouth. Just as they were about to go over to help Nan Yuxing, they heard Nan Yifan shout again. No one is allowed to help him. His voice was stern, and the two elders didn't dare to disobey. They could only stand there awkwardly and let Nan Yuxing's body sway and fall to the ground. Nan Yuxing was already seriously injured, and Nan Yifan had used a lot of strength in this slap. It wasn't something that he could withstand. Almost everyone didn't understand why Nan Yifan's attitude had taken a 180-degree turn. However, they weren't stupid. They knew that there must be an unknown reason, so they all tactfully kept their mouths shut. Nan Yifan closed his eyes, then looked at Rongxiu. "Successor, my son offended you just now. Please forgive him." Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. "Just because of this slap?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 17:16. It was obvious what he meant. Not enough. Nan Yifan clenched his fists. He knew that Rongxiu wasn't someone to be trifled with, and that it wouldn't be easy to get past him. Hence, he purposely gave Nan Yuxing a tight slap. However, Rongxiu did not appreciate it. He clenched his teeth and walked over to Nan Yuxing without saying a word. He dragged him up and gave him another slap. This time it was a slap to the face. Crisp. Loud. Before Nan Yuxing could react, there was a loud noise in his head and a sharp pain came. Bang! He fell to the ground again and spat out a mouthful of blood. This time, Nan Yuxing was so dizzy that he almost fainted. Nan Yifan paused. Rongxiu did not say a word. He took a deep breath and gave Nan Yuxing a few more slaps. Nan Yuxing could not say a word this time. After spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Nan Yifan closed his eyes. How could he not feel distressed and upset? However, at this moment, he could not think of any other way to solve the problem. At this point, Rongxiu finally spoke. "Why do you have to do this, Nan family head? I am not a narrow-minded person. Why would I care about what he said?" Nan Yifan spat out a mouthful of blood. "You don't care? If you don't care, why didn't you say anything earlier? You only spoke when Nan Yuxing fainted." However, he could not say these words directly. Nan Yifan threw Nan Yuxing to the ground. He spoke rudely to the saint, and should be taught a lesson. "Speaking of which, it's my fault for not teaching my son well. I'm really ashamed." When Nan Yifan said this, there was a hint of anger on his face. It was as if he wanted to kick Nan Yuxing a few more times. Rongxiu looked at Nan Yuxing, who was lying on the ground, and his thin red lips curled up slightly. No matter what, Nan Yuxing is the only son of the Nan family head. Now that his core of essence has been shattered, and he has become a cripple, how can he bear the punishment of the Nan family head? As he spoke, he raised his chin. "Elders, please treat him as soon as possible." Every word was like a steel knife, ruthlessly stabbing into Nan Yifan's heart. His face paled, but in the end he waved his hand. The two elders standing at the side hurriedly stepped forward. It wasn't easy for Nan Yuxing's condition to take a turn for the better. With these few slaps, all of his previous efforts had been wasted. It was even worse than the beginning. Nan Yifan then turned around and looked at Rongxiu. His expression was extremely restrained. "Saint, there were many misunderstandings in the past. However, I have already taught them a harsh lesson. Do you think we can let this matter pass?" Anyone could tell that Nan Yifan was begging for mercy. Elder Yu couldn't help but chuckle and whisper. Interesting. Although Yuntian Tower was a first-class aristocratic family, it was still slightly inferior to the Nan family. It was reasonable to say that when Rongxiu and Nan Yifan went up against each other, Rongxiu should be the one at a disadvantage. However, the truth was exactly the opposite. They really didn't know what Nan Yifan was afraid of. Or had they underestimated Rongxiu before? Yi Zhao put his hands behind his back and narrowed his eyes slightly. However, he didn't say anything. In fact, he was also thinking about this problem in his heart. Perhaps their understanding of Rongxiu was really far from enough. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he had heard something funny. Then he said slowly, "You're right. Patriarch Nan, did you think wrongly? From the beginning to the end, I was blaming Nan, not him." He said the last few words very slowly and clearly, one word at a time. Nan Yifan's expression suddenly changed. Rongxiu was playing with him. However, before he could explode, Rongxiu continued. "You provoked her time and time again, but Yor was magnanimous and didn't take it to heart. Unfortunately, you don't know what it means to quit when you're ahead. Not only do you not have the slightest bit of remorse, but you're even slandering and humiliating her in public now. Rongxiu spoke very slowly. His voice was light, but there was a hint of coldness in it. Nanny only felt that these words were like a sharp and cold knife against her neck. Back and forth, just waiting for the most suitable time to cut down ruthlessly. She trembled all over, and her legs went weak unconsciously. She subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan. Dad. Dad. Rongxiu wanted to kill her. He was determined to kill her. How could Nan Yifan feel good? He had already gone all out just now, and almost lost half of Nan Yuxing's life. But he didn't expect that Rongxiu still wouldn't let it go. After hesitating for a long time, Nan Yifan said with difficulty, "What exactly does the saint want?" Rongxiu must have seen through all his tricks at a glance. It was obvious that Rongxiu didn't care about those things at all. He would only stop when he was truly satisfied. So, Nan Yifan simply chose to ask directly. Rongxiu laughed. Patriarch Nan is straightforward enough. Then I won't beat around the bush. He raised his chin slightly and glanced at Nanny coldly. I want her tongue. His voice was low and his tone was extremely light, but it was not to be disobeyed. This wasn't a compromise or a discussion, but an order. Nan Yifan felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on his chest. He knew that Rongxiu had always been ruthless and merciless. Today, their people had offended him ruthlessly, so he would definitely take revenge. But this request was really too much. He only had this one daughter, and had always regarded her as the apple of his eye. Usually, he would coax her for a long time and dote on her very much. Now that Rongxiu wanted to cut off her tongue, Nan Yifan couldn't accept it no matter what. Nanny clutched his sleeves tightly. Her eyes were red and bean-sized tears kept falling. Father! Don't be like this. She had clearly seen her elder brother's miserable state just now. At this moment, she completely understood that her father was indeed extremely afraid of Rongxiu. If her father really agreed to this request, hot tears fell on the back of Nan Yifan's hand. He closed his eyes and held Nanny's hand. I don't agree to this condition. He could accept other punishments, but he was definitely not willing to sacrifice his bloodline. Just now, he seemed to be extremely ruthless towards Nan Yuxing. But in fact, he had been controlling his strength and skills, so he didn't cause any fatal injuries. But if he handed Nanny to Rongxiu to deal with, the consequences, he didn't even dare to think about it. Rongxiu didn't look surprised, as if he had already expected this. The corners of his lips seemed to be smiling as he said lightly, Patriarch Nan, I've already given you face. Unfortunately, he didn't want it. Nan Yifan immediately tensed up. Sensing his nervousness, Nanny had a bad feeling. Suddenly, she had an idea and shouted at Yi Zhao and Elder Yu in a sharp voice. Patriarch Yi Zhao, that Shangguan Yu privately contracted the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, which is a heinous crime. Rongxiu is also wrong for trying to cover it up. Are you really going to sit back and do nothing? Digression. It's the last 3 days, please vote. Every extra vote can be added to the explosive update on the 11th of next month. Xiaoxiang and QQ Reading have super surprise New Year's Day activities respectively, and they have already pinned the comments section to welcome everyone to participate. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1717. When Elder Yu heard this, he almost laughed out loud. Nanny was really crazy. She was about to die, but she still dared to say such things? She was afraid that she wouldn't die completely. Based on the current situation, the Nan family was completely at a disadvantage. Nanny was undoubtedly treating them as her last straw, and she was still hoping that they would help her. Even if they were really here to cause trouble for Shangguan Yu, what did it have to do with her? They couldn't be bothered if Rongxiu wanted to cut off her tongue. Yi Zhao frowned slightly, and a trace of impatience finally appeared on his face. Nanny thought that she had persuaded the other party, and was secretly delighted. Then, she heard Rongxiu laugh and ask, Clan leader Yi Zhao, do you want to help them? Yi Zhao spat out coldly. What does their life and death have to do with me? The reason why he was impatient was purely because he felt that it was too noisy after hearing Nanny talk about this over and over again. Rongxiu nodded, and a smile appeared on his lips. Thank you for your understanding, clan leader Yi Zhao. The two of them had only exchanged a few words, and had already finalized the result. One couldn't be bothered, while the other was determined to kill. Nanny felt like she had fallen into an ice cave. She never expected that the other party would be so indifferent. Nanny was almost crazy after being forced into a desperate situation. She shouted at the top of her lungs. Clan leader Yi Zhao, do you really not mind at all that Shengguan Yu contracted the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix privately? Even if the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is tarnished, you don't care at all. Yi Zhao's eyes turned cold. He was about to speak when he suddenly sensed something and looked up. Splash! The sound of tides surging could be heard. Everyone looked over and realized that the energy of heaven and earth around the black wall was surging rapidly into the huge and mysterious totem. It was daytime now, and the originally clear sky quickly became gloomy. Dark clouds gathered, stacking on top of each other. The sky was covered by thick clouds, and everything between heaven and earth seemed to be shrouded in a layer of shadow. Only the totem on the black wall shone brighter and brighter. Then, with the totem as the center, the blackness on the wall suddenly began to fade away. The originally thick and mottled stones gradually became transparent, glowing with a sparkling and translucent luster. As for the totem, it finally began to show its original brilliant colors. Everyone was deeply shocked by this scene. For a moment, their minds were shaken, and they didn't know how to react. This wall had endured the baptism of tens of thousands of years in the god-slaying mound, but it still stood proudly. It was always deep and heavy. Every stone piled on top of it was deeply engraved with everything that had happened here. They were solemn, ancient and untouchable. However, at this moment, their appearances had completely changed. Everyone could even see the mottled traces left behind on the surface, but only the thick black color was gone. Gradually, a slender and straight figure appeared behind the totem. "You're..." Chu Ning's eyes suddenly lit up, and he unconsciously took a step forward. The woman in red sitting cross-legged was none other than Yor. At this moment, she was sitting cross-legged quietly, staring intently at a transparent page in her hand. Her black hair hung down, and her side profile was beautiful and calm. Her body seemed to be shrouded in a layer of indescribable unique aura, which easily isolated all the hustle and bustle around her. From everyone's point of view, Chu Luyue seemed to be trapped in a huge transparent space. They could see her every move, but there was a wall in the middle, which was far away and untouchable. Silence reigned in the field. Suddenly, Chu Luyue tilted her head slightly and looked over. Her eyes were calm, but they also seemed to contain a myriad of stars, clear and bright. Immediately, she frowned slightly and said lightly, "It's so noisy." Almost at the same time, a childish voice was heard. "It's so noisy." Everyone was shocked. Only then did they see that not far away from Chu Luyue, there was a little girl with her hands on her waist, looking over angrily. She looked to be no more than 3 or 4 years old. She was wearing a reddish gold lotus leaf dress, and her hair was tied up in 2 buns with a red string and a golden bell. Her chubby white and tender little face was as cute as snow. It was Dumpling. At this moment, her big black grape-like eyes were burning with anger. Hot and anxious. That was real fire. "It's so noisy." Dumpling was really angry. Ever since she was swallowed into this strange space, she had been looking for traces of Ayu. After searching back and forth for a long time, she was finally pushed here by a strong force not long ago, and only then did she see Ayu. When she saw Ayu, she wanted to pounce on her, but she soon realized that Ayu seemed to be busy with something. So she waited obediently at the side. In the end, not long after, the originally dark space gradually brightened. Then she heard a lot of noise, especially that sharp and ear-piercing female voice, which annoyed Dumpling to death. Now, she was disturbing Ayu. She would never tolerate it anymore. "I've said it before." She raised her hand and pointed at Nanny. "You are really annoying." Seeing Dumpling appear and criticize her directly, Nanny panicked for a moment. But she quickly calmed down. What was there to worry about? The more this crimson gold heavenly phoenix protected Shang Guanyu, the angrier clan leader Yi Zhao, and the rest would be. How could the noble crimson gold heavenly phoenixes tolerate their own kind contracting with a human? Moreover, they were so loyal and sincere. This time, she didn't believe that Yi Zhao and the rest could tolerate it. She sneered, turned her head and said, "Clan leader Yi Zhao, did you see that? Not only did Shang Guanyu contract with your own kind, but she also ordered her around and completely treated her as her slave. Can you really take this lying down?" She thought that Yi Zhao would definitely fly into a rage after seeing this scene and hearing these words. However, Yi Zhao's reaction was completely out of Nan Yi's expectations. He stared intently at Dumpling, who was inside the wall. After confirming that she was safe and sound, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, he turned to look at Nan Yi. Meeting those cold and dignified eyes, Nan Yi suddenly felt a surge of uneasiness. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Yi Zhao's brows moved slightly, and he said calmly and dignified, "Dumpling is Shang Guanyu's contracted beast. Isn't it normal to speak up for her? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 17-18. Nan Yi widened her eyes in disbelief. Nan Yifan and the rest also quickly turned around and looked at Yi Zhao, almost suspecting that they were hallucinating. What did Yi Zhao just say? Very normal. He actually felt that this matter was very normal. Could it be that he's crazy? In an instant, Nan Yi felt that the world was in chaos. Yi Zhao. He was famous in the Divine Ruins world. Almost everyone knew how much he hated and was indifferent to the human race. But now, his own clan had formed a contract with the human race. And he actually didn't care? All the words that Nan Yi had prepared were suddenly stuck in her throat, and she couldn't say anything else. She pinched herself hard and relied on this pain to confirm that she wasn't dreaming. And those words were indeed spat out by Yi Zhao. "You, what do you mean?" Nan Yi stuttered. At this moment, she had already sensed that things seemed to be different from what she had expected. She wanted to try to salvage the situation, but everything seemed to be sliding in a direction that she couldn't control. Yi Zhao said indifferently, "It's literally what I said." He actually didn't care about this matter at all. Nan Yi felt as if her heart was being gripped tightly by something. Even breathing had become difficult for him. But in that case, then, isn't that Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix equivalent to betraying the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Could it be that you also? Second Miss Nan, are you kidding? Elder EU interrupted her with a grin. Dumpling is the young master appointed by our ancestors, and the next clan leader of our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Anyone can betray our clan, but she is the only one who can't. His indifferent words were tantamount to a heavy hammer that smashed fiercely into Nan Yi's heart. Her mind buzzed and instantly went blank. Young master. That Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was actually the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, and it was appointed by their ancestors. Then she said so much just now, wasn't it all a joke in their eyes? Nan Yi's vision turned black, and she fell to the ground. Second Miss. An elder was standing by the side. Seeing this, he hurriedly went forward and supported Nan Yi. Second Miss, are you all right? Nan Yi's legs went weak, and she almost couldn't stand steadily. Her body was cold, and her mind was in a mess. At this moment, she really wished that she would just faint. Everything that happened just now kept replaying in her mind, making her feel extremely embarrassed. She wished she could find a hole to hide in, and never appear in front of these people again. To think that she had thought that by saying so much, she would be able to stir up a conflict between Yi Zhao and Shang Guanyu. She had thought that she would be able to use this opportunity to destroy Shanghai Yu once and for all. Who would have thought? Yi Zhao and the others have been standing on the same side as Shang Guanyu from the very beginning. From the beginning to the end, she was the only one, a clown. What a joke. Nan Yi was trembling all over. Her face was pale, and she looked miserable. Where was the dignity and arrogance of the second miss of the Nan family? Nan Yifan was also stunned by this sudden turn of events. He stood there for a long time without moving. He didn't know what to say or do. When Nanny said those words, he had a laissez-faire attitude. Although he didn't show his emotions on his face like Nanny. Didn't he have the same thoughts as Nanny in his heart? At this moment he couldn't be bothered to help Nanny. Because he himself was panicking. Young Master. The young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. He couldn't help but turn around. If he hadn't heard it with his own ears, who would believe that such a little girl was actually the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Countless thoughts flashed through Nan Yifun's mind. Before this, he had never heard of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan having a young master in the Divine Ruins world. Then this matter was very likely to have happened recently. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan did seem to have held an ancestral worship ceremony some time ago. If he didn't guess wrongly, it should be at that time. But this Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was Shangguan Yu's contracted magical beast. How did she sit on the position of young master? Logically speaking, such an identity was a stain on the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was already good enough that she didn't become a sinner. How did she ascend to become the young master? Nan Yifun was extremely shocked and puzzled, but he didn't even have the qualifications or courage to ask this question. Earlier, Elder Yu had clearly said that the position of young master was personally appointed by their ancestor. He couldn't even afford to offend Yi Zhao. So how could he dare to question the ancestors of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? No wonder Yi Zhao, the clan leader, had personally made a move. How could he not be worried that something had happened to the young master? Previously, he felt that Yi Zhao and Nan Yifun were very concerned about the person they were looking for. But he never expected that the true identity of that little girl would be so shocking. Everything had become a hopeless situation. Yi Zhao looked coldly at Nanny. I forgot to say that Dumpling is a rare genius in our clan. She has the most noble bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. The purest bloodline. Saying that she had tarnished the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Was there anything more ridiculous than this? Nanny's eyes rolled back, and she finally fainted. The elder at the side looked at Nan Yifun with a troubled expression. Patriarch this. Nan Yifun clenched his fists tightly, and almost gritted his teeth. He was no longer in the mood to care about Nan Yi's situation. Today they had completely offended Rong Xiu and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was still unknown what kind of storm the entire Nan family would suffer. Fainted? Rong Xiu asked lightly. It's fine. With a wave of his sleeve, a black figure suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It was a puppet made entirely of black fine iron. It was tall and wore a suit of armor that was tough and iron-blooded. Golden flames were burning where its originally empty eyes were originally. The hearts of everyone present shuddered. The combat power of this puppet was probably extremely strong. Although there were no fluctuations of origin power around his body, that terrifying pressure was extremely frightening. Rong Xiu's voice was indifferent. Sky Demon, pry open her mouth. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1719. Upon hearing this order, the puppet immediately bowed respectfully. Then with a tap of its foot, it charged towards Nanny. He was extremely strong, and with just a stomp several cracks appeared on the ground. As for his figure, he was already like an arrow that had left the bow, flying away at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, he was already not far from Nanny. The elder supporting Nanny was shocked, and immediately set up a barrier in front of him, while retreating at the same time. However, these defenses couldn't even withstand a single blow from the puppet. Boom! He punched out, and the barrier instantly shattered. Violent energy surged in all directions. Some of it collided with the Sky Demon, but it didn't even leave a mark. God puppet! Nan Yifun's expression also changed. He immediately rushed forward and tried to stop the Sky Demon. However, the Sky Demon's speed was not inferior to his at all. In fact, his movements were even more agile. In a flash, he bypassed him and rushed directly in front of Nanny. Origin power surged around the elder's body, but before he could make a move, the Sky Demon had already kicked his wrist. Crack! The sound of bones breaking was especially crisp. Ah! That elder cried out in pain, and unconsciously loosened his grip. Nan Yi was instantly snatched away by the sky demon. Nan Yifan's heart sank. The sky demon ignored him, and used his elbow to clamp down on Nan Yi's neck, while his other hand pinched her chin tightly. The intense pain woke Nan Yi up again. When she came back to her senses, she realized that she was tightly clamped down. Her chin seemed to have been dislocated, and the sky demon's strength was extremely ruthless. This directly shattered half of her jawbone. She was forced to open her mouth, and cold air continuously poured into her lungs, causing her to feel cold all over. She had a bad feeling, and started to struggle frantically. However, the sky demon's combat strength was extremely strong. Even at her peak, she was no match for the sky demon, let alone now. Then, something flew over quickly. Sharp. Boiling hot. Nan Yi felt her vision blur. Then she heard something fall out and smash on the ground. Only then did the heavenly demon release her, and return to Rong Xiu's side in a flash. Nan Yi's body suddenly loosened, and she fell to the ground. Her hand seemed to be pressing down on something. She turned her head stiffly. A piece of tongue with dark red bloodstains was lying quietly on the ground. It was still warm. Nan Yi was shocked. Then, an indescribable and terrifying pain came from his mouth. The thick smell of blood instantly filled his mouth. Nan Yi widened her eyes in horror. Her tongue. That was her tongue. Rong Xiu had really cut off her tongue just now. Nan Yi let out a mournful cry as she sobbed. She wanted to say something, but all that came out of her mouth was a whimper. She couldn't say another word. Nan Yifan's face paled, his body swayed, and he almost fell. He had doted on Nan Yi since she was young. Now that he had to watch her tongue being cut off, how could he bear it? Blood kept flowing from the corners of Nan Yi's mouth, and her face was filled with tears. She looked really miserable. The scene was dead silent. Other than her whimpering cries, there were no other sounds. Everyone was shocked by Rong Xiu's straightforward move. No one expected that Rong Xiu would actually do as he said. He said that he would cut off Nan Yi's tongue. Even if Nan Yifan and the rest stopped him, he would still do it. Rong Xiu was a little irritated by her mournful voice. He narrowed his eyes dangerously. If you continue to make noise, I have ways to shut you up forever. Nan Yi's voice stopped abruptly. Her blood surged, her chest and abdomen churned, and more blood flowed from the corners of her mouth. However, after being glanced at by Rong Xiu's deep and cold eyes, she didn't dare to make a sound. She had no doubt that Rong Xiu would definitely do this. Luo Yin walked over quickly. Nan Yi looked at him without saying a word, but tears kept falling. Luo Yan's heart ached when he saw her like this. He took out a pill and fed it to her. But Nan Yi's mouth was full of blood, and she was in so much pain that she couldn't swallow the pill. The veins on Luo Yan's forehead bulged, but in the end, he could only endure it. He wanted to take revenge on Rong Xiu. However, this matter wasn't so easy. Not to mention that Rong Xiu's strength had increased a lot. He still had many trump cards that he hadn't revealed yet. It was really difficult to do anything to him. Just the attitude of the family head was too much to think about. Nan Yi was his only daughter, and he had doted on her for so many years. How could his heart not ache? But until now, Nan Yifan hadn't done anything to Rong Xiu. Coupled with his abnormal attitude when facing Rong Xiu previously, one couldn't help but think more about it. Nan Yifan would never be so polite to someone for no reason, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he would swallow his anger. He seemed to be rather afraid of Rong Xiu. What was he afraid of? Luo Yin didn't know. However, he understood that the things that were involved in this matter had definitely exceeded their expectations. So much so that Nan Yifan could swallow his anger. Besides, even if they disregarded everything and fell out with Rong Xiu, then, what about the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? They were also on Sheng Guanyu's side. In other words, all the grievances and pain today, Nan Yi had to bear it even if she didn't want to. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1720. Boom. Just as the situation reached a stalemate, the sound of an intense energy collision was heard. It was Shangguan Jing and Yu Hongshan fighting again. Yu Hongshan was already at a disadvantage. Now that he saw the Nan family suffer losses again and again, he had become the target of public criticism. He couldn't help but feel angry and anxious. He thought that by relying on Nan Yi and the Nan family, he still had some chance of winning today. Who knew that the remaining two parties were even more difficult to deal with? He didn't know what was so powerful about that Rong Xiao. But Nan Yifan's attitude was enough to explain many things. Besides, there was also Yi Zhao. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan clearly wanted to side with Shangguan Yu today. Shangguan Jing was a Taizu from Shangguan Yu, so they would naturally help. Now he was already at the end of his rope. His psychological defense line collapsed, and Yu Hongshan's combat strength declined rapidly. Soon he began to be defeated. Shangguan Jing took advantage of the opportunity to pursue him and beat him fiercely. He vented all the grudges of the past 1,000 years. Not long after, Yu Hongshan made a huge mistake, and Shangguan Jing seized the opportunity to give him a fatal blow. Bam! Yu Hongshan's translucent body finally exploded with this sound, vanished into thin air. His soul was destroyed. Phew! Shangguan Jing let out a long sigh. He didn't expect that Yu Hongshan had lived for more than 1,000 years in this black wall. But fortunately, all of this was finally over. The trace of unwillingness and anger that had accumulated in the depths of his heart finally dissipated with Yu Hongshan's complete death. For a moment, he was secretly glad that he had followed you or here this time. Otherwise, how would he have the chance to settle these old matters? Shangguan Jing looked up at Chu Luyue. Now, he only hoped that Yu could come out safely. Among those present, only the Nan family was suffering. Nan Yifan closed his eyes. The situation today was too unfavorable for them. They had no chance of winning if they forced it. The only thing they could do was to endure all of this. He walked to Nan Yi's side. When he saw Nan Yi's current state, his heart felt like it was being gripped tightly by something, and it hurt terribly. However, even he had to admit that Nan Yi's fate today was, to a large extent, caused by herself. Of all people to offend, why did he have to offend Rong Xiao? If she had only angered Rong Xiao, he could still fight for her. However, her words had completely offended the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Nan Yifan was filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would never have let her come here. However, it was too late to say anything now. Let's go home." His voice was low and hoarse. Nanny looked at him with empty eyes. Disappointment? No, it was despair. She thought that her father would protect her. But no. Everything that had happened in the past seemed like a joke now. Now that she was being treated like this, he didn't even have the slightest intention of seeking justice for her. How could Nan Yifan not know what she was thinking? But he also had his difficulties. He couldn't possibly let the entire Nan family go against Rong Xiao, and the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan for her, right? Moreover, she was clearly in the wrong this time. Even if word got out, they would be the ones in the wrong. Under such circumstances, what else could he do? Nan Yifan clenched his fists and his voice hardened. Luo Yan, take her back. Luo Yan closed his eyes, and could only agree in the end. However, just as he was about to take Nan Yi away, Nan Yi suddenly started shaking her head frantically. Her face was full of rejection. Boo-hoo! She couldn't speak anymore. Every sound was like a heavy hammer that smashed into the hearts of everyone in the Nan family. She wasn't leaving. She definitely wasn't leaving. She wanted to stay here and see what Shangguan Yu was up to. Anyway, she was already in this state. What difference did it make whether she left or stayed? Sensing her resentment, Luo Yan hesitated for a moment before turning to look at Nan Yifan. Patriarch, if you want to leave, you can leave directly. I'll stay here and accompany you. Nan Yifan was so angry that he felt suffocated. Was Luo Yan venting his anger on him as well? Was he having a good time? Nan Yuxing's pill of the essence had shattered, and he was completely crippled. Nan Yi's tongue had been cut off and she had become a mute. As her father, wasn't he the one who was the most heartbroken? He suppressed the anger in his heart. Okay, then we'll wait here together. We'll leave when she's willing to leave. The elders at the side wanted to comfort him, but the atmosphere was too cold and awkward. In the end, they chose to remain silent. No one cared whether they left or stayed. At this moment, Rong Xiao, Yi Zhao, and the rest's attention was already on Chu Luiyue and Dumpling. Everyone had come out, and only the two of them were still trapped inside. And for some reason, the black wall had started to become transparent, which made them feel even more uneasy. After a period of time, more than half of the black wall in front of everyone had faded. That strange totem had also revealed its original appearance. Mysterious and unfathomable, overflowing with light, majestic and awe-inspiring. Chu Luiyue's position was very subtle. Everyone looked from the outside and saw that she was right in the middle of the totem. She glanced at Nan Yi and retracted her gaze calmly, as if Nan Yi's life and death couldn't affect her at all. She threw away the paper in her hand. Her slender and delicate fingers moved gently, and another transparent paper flew over. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1721. What's that? Elder Yu couldn't help but ask softly. In fact, he wasn't the only one. Everyone present was very curious about this question. Although they could see Chu Luiyue, they couldn't see where the paper went after she threw it away, or where the new paper came from. The only thing they could see was that Chu Luiyue seemed to be very focused on studying these things. As for what was written on the transparent paper, no one knew. Yi Zhao didn't answer Elder Yu's question. He just turned his gaze and glanced at Dumpling. Sensing his gaze, Dumpling opened her mouth and smiled brightly. Thank you, Grandpa Leader. She originally only felt that this place was very strange, and was afraid that Yu would encounter some danger that she couldn't handle. Thus, she tried to send a message for help. She didn't expect them to really come. Although Dumpling looked young, she had been by Chu Luiyue's side for many years, and was very mature. It wasn't that she didn't know what it meant for Grandpa Leader to come personally. Thus she was very touched and grateful. Therefore, she was not stingy with her big smile. Seeing the bright smile on Dumpling's cute little face, Yi Zhao's heart suddenly felt as if it had been hit by something. It was very tender and loving. His expression didn't change much, and was still very dignified. Didn't I tell you before that if you encounter any danger, just say it? You're the young master. The clan will naturally do its best to save you. Elder Yu stood at the side and glanced at him lightly. TSK. He clearly wanted to take the opportunity to improve his relationship with Dumpling, but he still said so much nonsense. Even if Dumpling wasn't the young master, he had to come personally. Of course, he definitely couldn't say this in front of him. He had to leave some face and dignity for the clan leader, right? Thus, Elder Yu took a step forward with a smile and said, Dumpling, don't worry. Grandpa Fifth Elder is waiting for you here. Dumpling nodded vigorously and clenched her little fists. Yes, Grandpa Fifth Elder, wait for me. Elder Yu was very satisfied when he saw the smile on her little face, and heard her call him Grandpa Fifth Elder. It was worth it. Today's trip was really worth it. Elder Yu couldn't help but move closer to Yi Zhao. He chuckled and couldn't hide his pride. Clan leader, I see that Dumpling is very happy. Do you think I'll be able to hug Dumpling when she comes out this time? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. Yi Zhao looked at him coldly. What are you daydreaming about? He hadn't even hugged her yet, and now it was his turn? Elder Yu, if you want to hug me, say it yourself. If you don't say it, who will know? You're too embarrassed to say it, but you don't want others to think about it? Domineering. Unreasonable. Elder Yu snorted and said, That's right. That might not be a dream, but Patriarch, you always have a straight face. Aren't you being too serious? Which child would like it? As he spoke, he retreated to the side. If I stand here, Dumpling might not even come to hug me. Yi Zhao looked at him again. Yu, no one will treat you as a mute if you don't speak. Elder Yu trembled. Then he straightened his neck. Who's afraid of who? As long as Dumpling was happy. So what if the Patriarch was unhappy? Inside the wall, Chu Luiyue threw away the paper in her hand again. The sound of the zither rang in her ears. She raised her eyes and looked forward. And the last 3. Digression. What's missing today will be made up for in tomorrow's update. Although it's lying in the draft box, it will still be published tomorrow, haha. Waving my little hands to beg for monthly votes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1722. She had barely managed to memorize half of the entire song. In addition, the more she listened to it, the more pain and torture she felt at the beginning. The current Chu Luyue could basically listen to the zither music calmly and flip through the zither scores in front of her. From over 10,000 copies to the last 3 copies. No one knew what kind of pain and suffering she had gone through in the process other than herself. But fortunately, all of this was finally coming to an end. The 3 transparent pieces of paper floated quietly in front of her. Chu Luyue held her breath and watched intently. Then she chose the middle one. The moment she held it in her hand, the transparent paper shone brightly. However, Chu Luyue was already used to all of this, as she calmly looked at it in detail. She was so focused that the onlookers outside couldn't help but quieten down, as if they were afraid of disturbing her. Nan Yifan stared at her for a while, his eyes full of scrutiny and suspicion, wandering back and forth between her and the transparent paper in his hand. He seemed to be suspecting something, but he wasn't sure. After thinking about it, he only felt a headache and had no choice but to rub his temples. Patriarch. A weak and low voice sounded. Nan Yifan turned his head to look, only to find that Elder Wu Peng had silently walked behind him, without him noticing. Seeing that it was him, Nan Yifan's expression eased a little. Elder Wu Peng, what's the matter? Elder Wu Peng glanced at Nan Yi and said in a low voice. Patriarch, actually, Second Miss didn't mean to make things turn out like this. He had been with Nan Yifan for many years, and could naturally tell that Nan Yifan felt sorry for Nan Yi. But at the same time, he also had some resentment. Originally, it was a good experience, but in the end it turned out like this. This was something no one wanted to see. Nan Yifan thought that he was going to speak up for Nan Yi and frowned. Elder Wu Peng, since things have come to this, there are some things that really don't need to be said anymore. Patriarch, do you know why Second Miss has been chasing after them? Elder Wu Peng sighed. If it's really because of personal grudges, not to mention you, even I, an eldest young master, would never agree. These words made Nan Yifan's expression change slightly. He was well aware of Elder Wu Peng's character. It was indeed unlikely that he would allow Nan Yi to cause trouble. As for Nan Yuxing, although he was disappointed in his performance today, anyone who had their primordial core shattered and became a cripple wouldn't be able to calm down in a short period of time. So, there's really something else going on? Nan Yifan's expression became much more serious. If you have any difficulties, please tell me, Elder Wu Peng. Elder Wu Peng paused. The thing you asked second young mistress to find seems to be on that Shangguan Yu. Nan Yifan's expression suddenly changed. First, he looked around to make sure that everyone's attention was on the Shangguan Yu. Then he asked cautiously, really? Elder Wu Peng gently nodded. This old man has used the Great Star Catcher plate to deduce. Second young miss also sensed the aura of that thing on her body. There shouldn't be any mistake. Nan Yifan frowned and fell silent. If that was the case, then it was understandable why Nan Yi and the others have been chasing after Shangguan Yu. Why would that thing be on her body? Nan Yifan couldn't figure it out. I remember that you guys seem to have entered this god-slaying tomb together? Elder Wu Peng nodded as he briefly recounted the events that had transpired. Nan Yifan had mixed feelings. Previously, Nan Yi only said that there was some conflict between the two sides in the god-slaying tomb. But she didn't explain the cause and effect clearly. Now that Elder Wu Peng had explained it, many things could finally be explained. Although it was indeed Nan Yi and the others who had provoked the other party in the beginning, later on, they had indeed been entangled with Shangguan Yu and the others in order to find that thing. And it was precisely because of this that they had been swept into the black wall. Some of them had died, and some of them had been injured. In that case, it wasn't entirely Nan Yi's fault. So you're saying that they were one step ahead of you and found that thing? Nan Yifun's expression was cold. Elder Wu Peng thought for a moment and shook his head. Actually, I feel that ever since they entered the god-slaying tomb, they didn't have much time to look for this thing. And from the beginning to the end, Shengguan Yu didn't seem to know what we were looking for. When she was fighting with Nan Yi at the end, what she said didn't seem to be false. Nan Yifun frowned. You mean? Elder Wu Peng didn't say anything for a moment and looked up. In the transparent space of the wall, the figure behind the totem sat quietly, determined and persistent. She seemed to have entered a meditative state, and no matter what happened outside, it couldn't cause the slightest ripple in her heart. At this moment, there were only a few transparent pieces of paper in her heart and in her eyes. Perhaps that thing has always been with her. Chu Luiyue looked at the zither score in her hand. The light flowing on it transformed into notes that constantly overlapped with the sound of the zither in her mind. However, halfway through it finally got stuck again. She sighed softly, as if she had already expected this result, and didn't show any disappointment. She just threw away the paper in her hand with a calm expression. There were 2 pieces left. She didn't even look at it, and directly took the one on the right. Suddenly, she paused and looked up slightly. The space she was in was completely divided into 2 halves with her as the center axis. On the left, there was a thick darkness. On the right, there was a bright light. The people waiting outside were actually there at this time, so they could see her, and she could see them. And in the darkness on the left, there was a person and a zither. Senior Jing. Chu Luiyue turned her face slightly and looked over. Although it was dark, she could still see a blurry figure at the end of the darkness. The sound of the zither stopped. A low and lazy voice sounded, and it seemed to be more provocative than the sound of the zither. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. It's been hard on you. Jing smiled. Oh, why do you say that? Chu Luiyue raised her hand and took the other one. If I'm not wrong, no matter which one I look at first, the result will be the same, right? A faint smile appeared on her lips. Whether these so-called zither scores are real or fake, it's all up to you, isn't it? No matter which one I leave behind in the end, it doesn't matter. Because the real zither score must be on the last one. What he wanted was for her to finish reading all the zither scores. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1723. Chu Luiyue heard her own voice echo. She looked around and saw that there seemed to be a transparent and invisible barrier around her that blocked her voice. Every time she spoke, she would see faint ripples on the barrier around her. Her heart skipped a beat. She guessed that Senior Jing did not want the people outside to hear their conversation and set it up. Jing was silent for a moment after hearing her words. Then he laughed softly. With your intelligence, you should have guessed it long ago. Why are you only asking now? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. You must have your reasons for wanting me to finish reading it. Then she would do as she was told. At this moment, the only reason he asked this question was to seek an answer. Jing's chuckle gradually turned into laughter. Ha ha ha. I was right about you. In this world, no one is more suitable than you to be the new owner of this Guqin score. For tens of thousands of years, the Guqin score had been divided into 3 parts and scattered around. Apart from this one, which had always been with him, the other 2 were nowhere to be found. He had been waiting for the Guqin score to choose a new owner, but he did not expect that the wait would be so long. The years were long. He had thought that he would not be able to wait any longer. But in the end, he did not let him down. Clang! Jing plucked gently, and the Guqin sounded again. In that case, I'll help you one last time. Chu Luiyue knew that he was going to help her merge the Guqin score. She immediately restrained her expression and nodded seriously and respectfully. Thank you, Senior Jing. The sound of the Guqin entered her ears. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and looked at the transparent paper in her hand again. She looked at the one on the right first. Chu Luiyue quickly finished reading that one amidst the desolate and austere sound of the Guqin. She calmly threw away that piece of paper and looked at the last one. On the transparent paper, dazzling flowing light shone brightly. Chu Liyue stared at it, and then took a deep breath. This was the real zither score. She focused and began to study it very carefully. The strange thing was that there were no words on this piece of paper, only a colorful halo. But as she looked at it, she inexplicably began to match the sound of the guqin in her mind. Gradually, Chu Liyue realized that every note of the tune began to be clearly engraved in her mind. She was pleasantly surprised by this discovery. She had listened to this tune countless times before, but she could not completely memorize it. But now, it seemed that she did not need to deliberately think about it. The tune automatically appeared in her mind. More importantly, she could faintly hear that there seemed to be countless minute changes in this melody, as if it had extended to countless possibilities. But she was still able to smoothly accommodate them all. Everything began to flow naturally. Finally, at a certain moment the tune, Chu Liyue finally finished reading the last piece. Buzz! A strange ripple suddenly came from Chu Liyue's dantian. This fluctuation came from the transparent remnant page that was quietly floating in the air. Then, the guqin score in Chu Liyue's hand suddenly turned into a ray of light and flew into her body. The damaged part of the original page was slowly recovering. The two transparent pages began to connect with each other. Chu Liyue quickly realized that there was a subtle connection between the two. This feeling was indescribable with words. It was majestic, vast, and full of life. They were all closely connected to each other. In the unseen world, there seemed to be a distant and boundless sound of the guqin reverberating in her body. The force in Chu Liyue's body instantly began to flow rapidly. Then, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth began to crazily surge into her body. Chu Liyue was shocked and instinctively looked at Ajing. "Senior Ajing, this is..." "Sho." Ajing raised a finger and placed it on his lips. In the darkness, Chu Liyue could not see his face and expression clearly, but she heard his voice clearly. It was low, lazy, and carried a hint of inattentive tiredness. "There is a small crack in the fusion of the two guqin scores. It needs to be repaired with the energy of heaven and earth. Just watch." Chu Liyue's pupils constricted slightly. There was a small crack, but how could it be repaired with the energy of heaven and earth? Moreover, the amount of energy needed was too shocking. Chu Liyue suddenly remembered that when the transparent remnant page was in her body, it had turned into a water droplet and acted as her core of essence. Its ability to devour energy was unparalleled. Now that the two pieces had merged into one, it would be even more shocking. Chu Liyue held her breath. She had never tested how much energy that thing could absorb before. But now it would be even more difficult. Chu Liyue closed her eyes and looked inside herself carefully. The two transparent pages were connected to each other, and the damaged part in the middle was indeed being repaired bit by bit. But it was too slow. At this moment, her body was devouring the energy of heaven and earth around her at the fastest speed. The two thin transparent pages were like a bottomless pit, continuously accepting the energy from the outside. But there was no end in sight. Time passed slowly, and Chu Liyue became more and more shocked. The energy of this guqin score was already very shocking, but the damaged part was only being repaired a little. The light around her seemed to be gradually brightening. Chu Liyue opened her eyes and looked around. On her left, the thick black was fading at an alarming speed. The bright light was gradually sprinkling down. It was as if an invisible hand had broken the invisible but real barrier in the middle. The light began to penetrate her left and right sides, and the energy began to merge. The wind suddenly blew. The energy of heaven and earth began to rush toward Chu Liyue. The crowd outside noticed this scene, but they didn't feel that anything was wrong at first. But as time passed, they gradually realized that Chu Liyue's body was like a bottomless pit that could easily accommodate all the energy. The abundant and terrifying energy that could cause an ordinary high god to explode and die after devouring all entered her body. Her expression didn't even change at all. Nanyi's expression became more and more unsightly, and her nails dug into her palms. How could this be? How could this be? Although she didn't know what Shang Guanyu was doing, she still understood that a normal cultivator's body couldn't withstand so much energy. Even if Shangguan wanted to break through, it would be enough after absorbing so much energy. But it had been so long, so why hadn't Shangguan stopped? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1724. Chuning frowned worriedly. Will you really be alright? Just by standing there, he could already feel the powerful and majestic energy surging towards him, producing an astonishing pressure. It was as if something was pressing down on his chest, making it difficult for him to breathe. He wondered how Yu'er, who was in the center of the energy vortex, would feel. Compared to Chuning's worries, Shangguan Jing and Nan Suhui were much calmer. Yu'er has always known her limits. She won't do anything that will endanger her life. You can rest assured. Nan Suhui comforted. But in fact he was also very puzzled. Is she planning to continue breaking through? It doesn't seem like it. Although there was a huge gap between a high god and a noble god, there was no detailed classification. Aside from the difference in divine power, there was also a difference in divine body. Therefore, there was a huge gap between a high god and a high god. But Shangguan Yu had just recalled her divine realm and became a high god not long ago. How could she try to break through to a noble god in such a short time? Even if she had the strength now, she wouldn't do it. She had always been smart and knew that breaking through rashly would do more harm than good. Moreover, she hadn't even condensed a divine body. How could she break through to a noble god? Shangguan Jing looked at her without saying a word. He had watched her grow up. No matter what she did, she must have her own plans. There was no need to worry about others. Nan Suhui glanced at Rong Xiao and saw that he was as calm as usual. His hanging heart calmed down. He said to Chuning, "Don't worry. Yu'er will come out safe and sound." On the huge wall, with the totem as the center, the blackness had almost completely disappeared and was spreading to the sides. Chu Luyue sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees and her eyes closed. Her thick and long eyelashes cast a faint shadow on her face. Her side profile was beautiful and serene, but there was a noble aura that looked down on the world. Even if it was just a glance from afar, it still made people involuntarily feel reverence and submission, and they didn't dare to have any other thoughts. The energy between heaven and earth surged, and in the end, it all gathered into her body. That piece of damage was also gradually being repaired. Clang! The sound of the zither echoed in Chu Liyue's mind. The two pieces of music finally merged perfectly and became a complete piece. Of course, there were still some damaged marks on one end. What was missing was obviously the third, which was also the last music score. However, 2/3 of the music scores were now gathered in her hands, and they all recognized her as their master. Even she was amazed by the power contained in this treasure. Soon, this much more complete zither score transformed back into a transparent water droplet. Compared to before, this water droplet was clearly a bit bigger. Furthermore, the water droplet was filled with a brilliant light. It was bright but not dazzling. It was extremely beautiful and moved one's mind. Suddenly, Chu Liyue's glabella was boiling hot. Then, the huge totem on the wall suddenly transformed into a stream of light and flew into Chu Liyue's glabella. In an instant, the totem shone brilliantly. An indescribably strong pressure spread out from Chu Liyue's body. Senior Shangguan, that totem, is it the bloodline inheritance of the Shangguan clan? Nan Suhui suddenly asked. Shangguan Jing shook his head. In order to have a totem, one must have an ancestor who had reached the peak. Only such a person would have the power of bloodline, and only then would the descendants be able to inherit it. However, in the Shangguan clan, he was a Taizu. Before him, there was no one who was as strong as him. As for why this totem appeared in Chu Liyue's glabella, he really didn't know. Could it be because of some kind of inheritance here? Nan Suhui stroked his beard with uncertainty. Regarding this matter, he would have to personally ask that lass. Nan Yifan slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves and gritted his teeth. If he still couldn't figure out what had happened by now, he would have wasted all his years. No matter if it was obtained before or found this time. In short, That thing was indeed in Shang Guanyu's possession. Moreover, it had completely become her possession. The fading color of the wall was enough to explain everything. Nan Yifan was so angry that he couldn't wait to rush forward and take it back. However, there were so many people watching him. If he made a move now, not only would he not be able to take it back, he might not even be able to get away. So, he had to endure it. A rusty aura quickly spread out from Nan Yifan's mouth. He wobbled and almost fell. Elder Wu Peng hurriedly held him up. Family head you. Nan Yifan waved his hand, indicating that he was fine. Elder Wu Peng looked at his pale and haggard expression that couldn't hide his resentment. His lips moved, but in the end he didn't say anything. He just sighed silently in his heart. In fact, after looking at this series of events, he already understood that it was clearly impossible for them to get that thing back. As the family head, Nan Yifan had suffered a series of blows today. Elder Wu Peng was actually very surprised that he could hold on until now. Nan Yuxing's pill of origin shattered, and he became a cripple. Nan Yi's tongue was cut off in public, and she was humiliated. In addition, Elder Bai Tong was sacrificed. No one would be able to bear so many things. Needless to say, Nan Yifan was still enduring until now. He was probably going to suffer internal injuries from holding it in. However, they really couldn't afford to offend the others present. Other than swallowing their anger and silently biting their teeth, there was nothing else they could do. Luo Yin looked at Nan Yi, whose eyes were red, and his heart ached. Now that we're done, let's go? The outcome was already decided. If he continued to watch, it would only make him sadder. Besides, you still have to go back and treat your injuries properly. A mocking sneer flashed across Nan Yi's eyes. Treatment? Given her current situation, there was no way to remedy it. She would become a mute for the rest of her life. Then, she looked at Shang Guanyu. Her aura was astonishing, and she was in high spirits. There wasn't even a trace of blood on her body. The two of them formed a stark contrast. How could Nan Yi stand it? Endless resentment surged in her eyes, and she let out an unwilling whimper. Woo! It was so miserable that it made one's heart tremble. Luo Yin frowned. Given Nan Yi's current state, it was useless no matter how he tried to persuade her. It was better to leave this place first. He reached out his hand, intending to forcefully take Nan Yi away. A cold and pleasant voice suddenly sounded from behind. Wait! Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1725. Even though he didn't mention any names, Luo Yin immediately and keenly sensed that this voice was calling them. He paused and turned back. A trace of vigilance and impatience appeared on his face. What else do you want to do? Don't you think you've harmed Yi enough? Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly and laughed softly as if she had heard a joke. Why do you say that, Senior Luo Yin? When did I harm Nan Yi? From the beginning to the end. Weren't you the ones who pursued us relentlessly and wanted to kill us all? They had only carried out a counterattack, so why was the other party so relentless? Could it be that only you are allowed to win and bully others, and that it is a crime for others to resist and defend themselves? Luo Yin was speechless for a moment. He came over halfway and didn't know the cause and effect. After hearing Nan Yi's words, he was certain that everything was the other party's fault. But just now, he finally learned the truth from Elder Wu Peng and the others. Of course, he also knew that Nan Yi herself had to bear a large part of the responsibility for this matter. But he had always doted on Nan Yi, and would unconsciously speak up for her in his heart. In addition, Nan Yi's current situation was too miserable. He really couldn't control himself, and blamed all his resentment and anger on others. Chu Liyue's gaze landed on Nan Yi. Nan Yi seemed to have sensed something and looked over as well. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Liyue asked with a faint smile. Second Miss Nan, are you done crying? Nan Yi suddenly felt a chill in her heart. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave, and it was bone-chilling. At this moment, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Shang Guanyu. It's really scary. Her hysterical wailing stopped abruptly. Facing such a gaze, she couldn't even cry. Shang Guanyu nodded in satisfaction. Looks like you've cried enough. This Nanny was really strange. His tongue had already been cut off by Rong Xiu for sowing discord and distorting the truth. Who would have thought that she was still unrepentant, and even dared to cry in front of so many people? He really doesn't want to take my life. It finally quieted down. Chu Luyue turned around and took a look. It was empty. All the darkness around her had gradually faded away when she had devoured the energy of heaven and earth to repair the music score. When she finished repairing the music score, the last bit of darkness was illuminated by the brilliant light. As for Senior Jing, he disappeared as well. Chu Luyue looked around. She was in a special space within the wall. The wall had become transparent, so the people outside could clearly see her figure, and she could also see everything outside. However, judging from their reactions, they probably didn't see Senior Jing, let alone know of his existence. Chu Luyue felt somewhat regretful. She knew that Senior Jing had helped her a lot. In the end, she didn't even have the time to say thank you before they were separated. What a pity. She was silent for a moment, but quickly collected her emotions and turned to look at Dumpling. She waved her hand. Dumpling. Are you? Seeing that Chu Luyue had finally finished everything smoothly, Dumpling heaved a sigh of relief. Then she rushed towards her excitedly and threw herself into her arms. She hugged Chu Luyue's neck tightly with both arms and curled up in Chu Luyue's arms, rubbing her cheeks intimately. Are you? Dumpling missed you so much. Chu Luyue's heart warmed and she hugged her even tighter. I missed you too. For Tuanzi, perhaps only a few days had passed in the meantime, but for her it had been decades. Senior Jing had said before that she had read faster than expected, so it didn't take her 100 years. However, it was still decades. She didn't feel it before, but now that she was hugging Dumpling's soft little body and listening to her soft and coquettish voice, Chu Luyue felt a long-lost longing in her heart. She weighed Dumpling in her arms and then took a step forward. The moment Chu Luyue walked out of the wall, a breeze blew and rolled up the corner of her clothes. There seemed to be a fluctuation behind her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she looked back. The black color that had spread to the edge instantly scattered like thick ink. The stone that had become crystal clear not long ago was quickly dyed black. In less than a quarter of an hour, it returned to its original heavy and solemn appearance. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, no one would have believed that everything had happened here before. She stared at the black stone for a long time and silently said in her heart, "Thank you, Senior Jing." Although no one answered, she still felt that Senior Jing should be able to hear her. Everything around her finally returned to normal. Chu Luyue turned around and walked forward. Nanny's body tensed up instantly. She was here. What was she going to do? She was already in such a sorry state. Was she still unwilling to give up? Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Nanny's mind, causing her to feel terrified and nervous. Chu Luyue walked over step by step. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. Nanny instinctively grabbed Luo Yen by the side, her face pale. Luo Yen patted her hand gently, then took half a step forward and blocked Nanny with a cold expression. What else do you want? Chu Luyue didn't stop in her tracks, as if she didn't hear his warning at all. Luo Yan's expression turned even colder. If you dare to do anything to Yi again, I won't be polite. You. Before he could finish speaking, Chu Luyue had already walked in front of the two of them, and continued walking forward without stopping. They brushed past each other. She didn't even look at Luo Yan and Nanny. The rest of Luo Yan's words were suddenly stuck in his throat, unable to go up and down. Chu Luyue walked for a while before putting Tuanzi down. Then, she solemnly and seriously bowed to Yi Zhao and the other man to thank them. Thank you, clan leader Yi Zhao and elder Yu, for coming to the rescue. Yi Zhao's expression was indifferent. Since Dumpling asked for help, we naturally had to come. There's no need to thank us. Besides, we didn't do anything this time. Chu Luyue straightened her body, curved her lips and smiled. Seniors, you're too polite. If they weren't here, The Nan family would definitely not let this matter rest so easily. She, on the other hand, had brought Dumpling to a false alarm and made them worry for a long time. She gently patted Dumpling's head and urged her softly. Dumpling, why aren't you thanking the two of them? Tuanzi nodded hard and then bowed to the two of them in a formal manner. Thank you, Grandpa Clan Leader. Thank you, Grandpa Fifth Elder. Looking at her cute little face, Yijiao's fingers twitched. Why did he feel like pinching her? Unfortunately, he was used to being serious and didn't know what to do. He really couldn't bring himself to do this. At this moment, Elder Yu had already bent his legs slightly and opened his arms magnanimously. He chuckled at Tuanzi and said, Tuanzi, Tuanzi. Dumpling, come and let Grandpa Fifth Elder take a good look at you. Are you injured? Compared to Yijiao and the other elders, Elder Yu's attitude toward Chu Luyue and Dumpling was very good from the start. In addition, he had helped them a lot both openly and secretly, so Chu Luyue and Dumpling were naturally closer to him. Upon hearing Elder Yu's words, Tuanzi didn't think too much about it and immediately ran over. In the blink of an eye, she was in front of Elder Yu. She lifted her little face and turned left and right, revealing a big smile. Grandpa Fifth Elder, look. I'm fine. Dumpling was also very grateful for their arrival, so she wasn't stingy with her smile and enthusiasm. Elder Yu's heart was about to melt. Ah, so cute. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had never seen someone who could transform into a human at such a young age. Under normal circumstances, the juniors they saw were at least in their teens. But Dumpling looked like she was only 3 or 4 years old now. This was a completely different feeling. Even though they knew that Tuanzi had the purest bloodline and had opened the 4th meridian and was definitely one of the best in the younger generation, looking at her cute and petite appearance, they couldn't help but feel pity for her. They couldn't wait to hold her in their palms and give her all the best things in the world. Finally, Elder Yu couldn't help but reach his hand forward, patting her hair bun tentatively and praising her sincerely. Dumpling is so awesome. Tuanzi chuckled. Then it rushed forward and hugged Elder Yu's thigh. Grandpa Fifth Elder is awesome too. She saw it just now. Those arrogant people from the Nan family were so respectful in front of Grandpa Fifth Elder and the rest. Elder Yu. Yijiao. Digression. In the blink of an eye, it was the last day of 2019. She still remembered that she was thinking about opening a book at this time last year. A year's time flew by just like that. This year, I'm really grateful for everyone's company and support. Without all of you, there wouldn't be today's February. In the new year, the journey continues. I hope I can still be with all of you. Happy New Year! Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1727. Rongxiu's expression turned cold as he quickly grabbed her hand. The two figures disappeared at the same time. The collapsing void was quickly covered by a thick layer of darkness, completely concealing their tracks. Are you? Everyone present was shocked by this sudden scene, and they all cried out in alarm. However, it happened too quickly. Before they could react, they had already disappeared. Nan Suhui frowned and was about to tear open the space again to follow them. Shang Guanjing stretched out his hand and stopped him. It's useless. The void here is shaking. Every space crack will lead to a different direction. Even if we tear open the space at the same place again, we won't be able to reach the same place as them. Shang Guanjing had been here before, and could be considered the person who was most familiar with the world of divine ruins among the people present. If even he said so, then it proved that this method would not work. Then what should we do? Nan Suhui's face was filled with anxiety. This person had just come out of the strange wall, and had not said anything before he fell into the void again. No one knew where he went. The world was so big. How could they find him? Shang Guanjing also frowned and fell into deep thought. Actually, this is not the first time something like this has happened. 1,000 years ago, I came here with Yu Hongshan. He was the one who fought with me just now. Back then, a conflict broke out between us here. Due to various coincidences, he was sucked into the black wall and could never come out. As for me, I was swallowed by the void. When I came out, I was already in the northern region of the wilderness. You or shouldn't be in fatal danger. Besides, Rongxiu is with her. It's just, I'm afraid it will be a little difficult to find them immediately. His words silenced the crowd. The northern region of the wilderness. That was a very dangerous place. It was thousands of miles away from here. But this was not the most important thing. For them, even if it was the northern region of the wilderness, or a place more dangerous than that, it was not impossible for them to go there. The most important thing was that they had to determine the location of Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu first. The divine ruins world was vast and boundless. Who knew where they had been sent to this time? Amidst the suffocating silence, a loud cry suddenly rang out. Ah! Ayu is missing! Woo woo woo! Ayu! The person crying was Dumpling, Shangguanjing, and the others looked at each other. Everything happened so suddenly that only Rongxiu reacted the fastest and followed him. Dumpling, on the other hand, was nestled in Yizhao's arms, so she couldn't catch up with them immediately. As a result, she was left behind. Seeing Dumpling crying, Yizhao immediately panicked. He quickly raised his hand to carefully wipe away Dumpling's tears. His palm was thick and rough, even bigger than Dumpling's face. This action was particularly clumsy. Dumpling, don't cry, don't cry. Yizhao was also very anxious. When had he ever done such a thing? Usually, the clansmen were all respectful when they saw him. If anyone did anything wrong, Yizhao's reprimand was enough to put a lot of pressure on them. In short, no one dared to be presumptuous in front of Yizhao. However, Dumpling was different. On one hand, she didn't grow up in Phoenix Mountain, so she had never seen Yizhao's dignity and power. On the other hand, she had been with Chu Luiyue for a long time, so her personality had become casual, and she wasn't afraid of Yizhao's anger at all. If she was afraid, she wouldn't have confronted them head-on in the Phoenix Temple. As a result, Tuanzi burst into tears. Yizhao had a headache. Now, not only did he have to carry her, but he also had to coax her. Dumpling's crying made him feel extremely uncomfortable, but he didn't know how to comfort her. Hence, he glared at Elder EU angrily. What are you looking at? Come over and think of a way to coax her. Elder EU, who was inexplicably angered, was stunned. You were the one who hugged her when you were hugging her. Now that you're coaxing her, you're thinking of me? However, he couldn't afford to offend either of them. Furthermore, he also felt terrible when he saw Dumpling crying. Elder EU had no choice but to swallow his words. He pondered for a moment and coaxed. Dumpling, don't cry first. Let's see if we can sense where they are now. If we can find any clues, we can go and look for them directly. After all, there's a contract between them. Hearing this, Dumpling stopped crying. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and nodded while sobbing. Then I'll try. Everyone, including Shangguanjing, looked over. Obviously, all their hopes were placed on Dumpling. Dumpling closed her red eyes, held her breath, and began to seriously search for traces of Chu Luiyue. Fortunately, they were no longer within the black wall, so the connection between her and Chu Luiyue was not broken. It was just that this connection was really a little illusory and difficult to grasp. After a while, Dumpling opened her eyes and frowned. Seeing her expression, everyone already had an answer in their hearts. However, Elder EU still asked a question. Dumpling, how is it? Did you find anything? Dumpling shook her head. Ayu seems to still be in the void turbulence. I can't accurately determine her direction and location for the time being. Everyone looked at each other. That's true. If she was really sent from here to somewhere thousands of miles away, it would probably take a long time. Dumpling clenched her small fists. I'll continue to search. I'll definitely find Ayu. As long as Chu Luiyue arrived somewhere, she would be able to find him very quickly. In the face of Tuanzi's decision, no one had any objection. Yizhao put Dumpling down, so that she could focus on searching for Chu Luiyue's aura. Dumpling sat cross-legged and closed her eyes again. The others present also subconsciously held their breaths and quietened down, patiently waiting for Dumpling's answer. On the other side, Chu Luiyue felt that there was nothing under her feet, and her body fell back uncontrollably. Immediately, she felt a broad and warm hand grab her wrist tightly. The surroundings instantly fell into darkness, and she was also pulled back by this hand and fell into a familiar embrace. A faint cold fragrance instantly filled her nose, making Chu Luiyue relax a lot. Rongxiu. Rongxiu responded in a low voice. His voice was exceptionally low as he wrapped one arm around her slender waist and hugged her tightly. Chu Luiyue was surprised for a moment. Rongxiu's movements seemed to be much faster than before, and the aura on his body. She didn't have the time to take a closer look at him just now. Now that she was closer, she realized that he seemed to have changed a little. She raised her head slightly and asked with some uncertainty, how did you catch up? You broke through? Rongxiu lowered his head, gently grabbed her waist and pushed her up. Then, he easily found her soft and sweet lips in the darkness. The vague syllables with a smile disappeared between his lips. Chasing you is what I'm best at and most passionate about. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1728. Rongxiu had originally wanted to stop after tasting her, but her lips were too soft, and her breath was too sweet. He almost couldn't help but linger on. After going back and forth a few times, he heard her slightly hurried panting. Only then did he restrain himself and stop. He tilted his head slightly and rested his chin on her shoulder. His hot breath fell on her slender and delicate neck, causing a slight shudder. The hand that was holding her slender waist seemed to have tightened a lot more than before. His body was tense, and he half leaned on her like this. After a while, he let out a long sigh and couldn't help but chuckle. You really reap what you sow. The self-control that he was so proud of always crumbled in front of her. Chu Luiyue's cheeks were slightly hot. Your Highness Holy Son, your heart is really big. Even at this time, you're still thinking about this? Rongxiu turned his head, and his lips lightly brushed against her cheek. His warm breath fell on her ear, and Chu Luiyue could even hear the subtle flow of the surrounding air. Rongxiu's voice was extremely low and seductive. He said frankly and ambiguously, It's been so long since you went to Phoenix God Mountain. If I said I didn't want to, I would be lying. His voice was a little hoarse, and mixed with a scorching breath. It was especially easy to make people blush, and their hearts beat faster. However, his tone was so frank and upright, and also carried a little obvious grievance. On the contrary, Chu Luiyue didn't know how to respond. She stretched out her finger and tapped on his broad and firm chest, changing the topic. This place is dangerous. Your Highness should be more careful. Rongxiu laughed, then straightened up, held her hand and looked around. It was dark all around them, but there was a light golden barrier around the two of them. Rongxiu had conveniently set it up when the two of them fell here. The violent turbulence around them was isolated, and the two of them could be said to be calm within the boundary. But the most unsettling thing was that they didn't know where they were going. Chu Luiyue said, Taizu said before that he was sent directly to the northern territory of the untainted land 1,000 years ago. I wonder, where will we be sent to this time? Rongxiu smiled. The faint light shone on his face, only revealing his calm and noble demeanor. It's still somewhere in the divine ruins world. His tone was relaxed and carried a hint of indifference. He didn't seem to take this matter to heart. Hearing his tone, Chu Luiyue could not help but turn to look at him. That's right. There's something I forgot to ask you. Rongxiu nodded. Ask away. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips slightly. The Nan family's position in the divine ruins world should be higher than the Yuntian Tower, right? But when Nan Yifan saw you, why was he so? She paused for a moment and thought for a long time. She didn't know what words to use to describe it. You want to ask why Nan Yifan is so afraid of me? Rongxiu answered her with a smile. Chu Luiyue nodded. Afraid? This word sounded too straightforward, but it was indeed accurate. Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rongxiu was indeed too strange. After Nan Yi and the others found out about Rongxiu's identity, they didn't take it to heart. From the beginning to the end, they were all high and mighty, obviously relying on the Nan family's confidence. However, as the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan's expression immediately changed when he saw Rong Xiao. After that, not only did he swallow his anger and apologize, he even endured Rong Xiao cutting Nan Yi's tongue in public. If he wasn't afraid of Rong Xiao, it would be strange. But why? Rong Xiao was the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, and now had great power and a noble status. But in the Divine Ruins world, Yuntian Tower wasn't the only one. Chu Luiyue hadn't heard of this Nan family before, but it was obviously more powerful than Yuntian Tower. Then, there must be other more powerful sects that she didn't know about. To be able to make Nan Yifan act like this, Rong Xiao definitely had other trump cards in his hands. Actually, the reason is very simple. I've dealt with him before, and he suffered a loss because of me. Moreover, I have something on him, so, when he sees me, he naturally has to take the initiative to avoid me. Rong Xiao's tone was very calm, as if he was talking about something very ordinary. Chu Luiyue was secretly shocked. Who was Nan Yifan? His intelligence, methods, and strength were all top-notch. He actually suffered a loss at the hands of Rong Xiao, and even had something on him in the hands of Rong Xiao. Then it could only mean that Rong Xiao was too heaven-defying. Chu Luiyue had always thought that she was good at tricking people, but at this moment compared to Rong Xiao, it was still unknown who was stronger and who was weaker. Seeing that Rong Xiao was too lazy to talk about the past, Chu Luiyue didn't ask in detail. She could tell that Rong Xiao really didn't take this matter to heart. In other words, he didn't put Nan Yifan in his eyes at all. Chu Luiyue had a very subtle feeling in her heart. She had long known that Rong Xiao was powerful, and could even be said to be unfathomable. She had already realized this when they first met. But now, she felt that she had still underestimated him. Suddenly, the barrier beside the two of them shook violently. Chu Luiyue's thoughts were interrupted. Rong Xiao raised his gaze slightly and looked forward. It's time to go out. Chu Luiyue followed his gaze, and saw that the stagnant darkness suddenly fluctuated. Then a bright white light shone out from it. The surrounding turbulence became even more violent. Rong Xiao's barrier also began to shake more. Chu Luiyue only felt that the surrounding power began to crazily squeeze towards her. Rong Xiao pulled her into his arms. The next moment, the sky brightened up. The two of them flew out in an instant. Bang! As soon as Rong Xiao landed with her in his arms, he heard the sound of something shattering. The dazzling sunlight made it difficult for Chu Luiyue to adapt to. She subconsciously narrowed her eyes, then looked down in the direction of the sound. Beneath her feet, a jade plate had been shattered into pieces. It seemed that when they came out just now, Rong Xiao stepped on it, and it became like this. Fortunately, Rong Xiao's boots were of excellent quality, so it was not damaged. Chu Luiyue breathed a sigh of relief. However, before she could finish her breath, she acutely sensed that the surrounding atmosphere was not right. It was too quiet. The air seemed to have solidified, but there was also a strong murderous intent, silently covering the sky and earth. Chu Luiyue raised her head stiffly and looked around. When she saw the scene around her clearly, she suddenly gasped in shock, and her pupils shrank. This was, almost at the same time, Dumpling, who was far away in the God-Slayer mound, suddenly felt something and opened her eyes. Her eyes were bright, and she excitedly raised her hand and pointed in a certain direction. Ayu is over there. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1729. The people who had been waiting for a long time also became excited. Shang Guanjing immediately asked, Dumpling, are you sure? Dumpling nodded seriously. Yes, it's over there. She and Ayu have a contract, and they are very close to each other. There will be no mistake. It's just that Ayu seems to be very far from here. Dumpling frowned, feeling a little regretful and worried. Nan Suhuai asked, So, she and Rong Xiao are no longer in the God-slaying tomb? Dumpling bit her finger and gave an affirmative answer. Yes. Shang Guanjing calmed himself down. It's normal. Although the world of divine ruins is vast, it's possible for the void to collapse and the turbulence to send them anywhere. Fortunately, we have Dumpling now. As long as we follow Dumpling's senses, we should be able to find you and the others soon. Nan Su Huai and Chu Ning also nodded. A huge rock in their hearts was finally lifted. Nan Su Huai said, "There's no time to lose. Let's go over immediately." Of course, Tuanzi agreed wholeheartedly. She wanted to see Ayu so much now. However, Yi Zhao and Elder Yi were in a dilemma. Dumpling wanted to follow Nan Su Huai, and the others to find Chu Luyue. Of course, this was not a problem, but the key was should they still follow? Originally, they had rushed over to help Dumpling. Now that Dumpling was not in danger, it was time for them to go back. However, Yi Zhao and Elder Yi were somewhat reluctant. Especially Yi Zhao. It was not easy for him to get this opportunity to hug Dumpling. However, before he could properly enjoy it, he had to leave. After this separation, he did not know when they would see each other again. Elder Yi glanced at Yi Zhao a few times. He had followed Yi Zhao for more than 100 years, and was best at figuring out Yi Zhao's thoughts. In particular, he knew clearly what Yi Zhao was thinking now, because he had the same idea. While they were still in a dilemma, Nan Su Huai asked, "Clan leader Yi Zhao, Elder Yi, what do the two of you plan to do in the future?" He was asking them if they were going to stay or leave. Elder Yi felt somewhat regretful. According to the clan leader's usual style, he would never continue to act with them. Even if it was for Dumpling's sake, he had gradually eliminated his grudge against these people. However, as the patriarch of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, his every word and action would attract the attention of countless eyes in the Divine Ruins world. If they left with these people today, who knew what the outside world would say about them in the future? Elder Yi shook his head. "I'm afraid we will escort Dumpling to her destination until she meets up with Shangguan Yu." Yi Zhao suddenly spoke. His voice was low, and his expression was solemn. However, the words that came out of his mouth instantly caused Elder Yi to widen his eyes in shock. He looked at Yi Zhao in disbelief, wondering if he had heard wrongly. What did the clan leader say? He wanted to escort Dumpling all the way? Didn't that mean he was going to continue to act with Shangguan Jing and the others? Nan Su Huai and the others were also very surprised. According to their understanding of Yi Zhao, the latter didn't seem like someone who would be willing to act with them at all. Moreover, his identity was special. If this matter were to spread, it would definitely cause a big storm in the entire Divine Ruins world. Needless to say, this was definitely for Dumpling's sake. Nan Su Huai and the others looked at each other, and then at Dumpling in unison. After all, she was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Her treatment was indeed different. Moreover, they could also see that Yi Zhao really doted on Dumpling. He was even willing to make these compromises for her. Nan Su Huai nodded. "Clan leader Yi Zhao, please." Yi Zhao looked at Dumpling. Dumpling pointed ahead excitedly. "Over there." Dead silence. Chu Liyue's eyes quickly scanned the surroundings. At this moment, she and Rong Xiu were standing on a huge square, and it was right in the middle. On the left and right, there were a few rows of people sitting neatly. At a glance, all of them were unfamiliar faces. Most importantly, the aura on these people was extremely powerful. Just by standing there, Chu Liyue felt that it was a little difficult to bear the pressure. The countless pairs of eyes that were filled with scrutiny, suspicion, and hostility made her even more uneasy. These people were not humans. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. She was certain that these people were definitely not humans. The aura on their bodies was somewhat familiar. Chu Liyue slowly clenched her fists. An answer was on the verge of coming out. The Great Phoenix Dragon. "It's you guys." Suddenly, a familiar voice was heard. Cold, gloomy, and with a trace of undisguised unwillingness and resentment. Chu Liyue frowned slightly, and turned her head to look. In the crowd, a gloomy face came into view. It was Mao Yao. He sat in a relatively remote corner of the second row, very inconspicuous. In addition, during this period of time, he had become haggard and thinner, and he no longer had the high-spirited and proud appearance from before. That was why Chu Liyue did not recognize him at first. But at this moment, when she heard this voice and met that gaze, Chu Luiyue immediately confirmed his identity. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. Mao Yao was here, and the surrounding people seemed to be great phoenix dragons. Then this place was Divine Dragon Island. Rong Xiu's low and calm voice rang in her ears. He laughed, as if he found it quite interesting. I didn't expect that this time we would actually come here. Chu Luiyue heard that he was actually in the mood to laugh, and the corners of her eyes twitched violently. Divine Dragon Island. Wasn't that the lair of the great phoenix dragons? They had really barged into a tiger's den. The great phoenix dragon clan was also an ancient divine beast, and they were also extremely arrogant. Although their attitude towards humans was slightly more polite than the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, they had never allowed humans to enter their territory. In all these years, there had never been any news of someone barging into Divine Dragon Island in the Divine Ruins world. Chu Luiyue once again carefully examined her surroundings. This solemn and dignified atmosphere. This group of people gathered together. Everything was showing that not only had the two of them come to Divine Dragon Island, but it seemed that they had come at a particularly bad time. Senior Mao Yao, how have you been? Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly as she greeted him with ease. It was as if the various battles in the past had never existed. When Mao Yao saw the two of them, he was already furious. At this moment, when he saw the smile on Rong Xiu's face, he was even more furious. Good. The guts of these two people were really big. It was fine if they treated him like that before, but now, they actually dared to barge into Divine Dragon Island. Everyone stared at Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu curiously. Someone asked, Elder Mao Yao, do you know these two people? Mao Yao was so angry that he laughed and sneered. I know them. Of course I know them. These two people are the famous Holy Son of the Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiu, and the one beside him is Shangguanyu. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1730. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone's expressions changed at the same time. Most of them had heard of Rong Xiu's name before. More importantly, the woman beside him was actually Shangguanyu. Recently, her name was much more famous than Rong Xiu on Divine Dragon Island. Shangguanyu? Isn't that the person from Lingxiao College? That's her. I heard that Shangguan Jing is her Taizu. After Shangguan Jing took away our clansman's corpse, it fell into her hands. She was also the one who injured Elder Mao Yao. This seems like her strength is only at the exalted god level. Elder Mao Yao is so powerful. How could he have suffered such a big loss at her hands? Shh. Lower your voice. Can't you see that Elder Mao Yao's expression is already very ugly? But I'm also telling the truth. I'm just curious. What's so powerful about this Shangguanyu? What's so powerful? She came directly to Divine Dragon Island today. How can an ordinary person have such courage? That's true. But now that she's here, I'm afraid Elder Mao Yao won't let her off so easily, right? Everyone discussed animatedly. Even though they had lowered their voices, everyone present was an expert with extraordinary five senses. How could they not hear it? Mao Yao clenched his fists tightly, and the veins on his forehead bulged. These people's words were too unpleasant to hear. If it were in the past, even if they thought so, they would definitely not dare to say it directly in front of him. But it was different now. In this 1000 Summit, he was directly removed from the affairs in charge, and the power in his hands was quickly divided up by the other elders. In addition, after he was injured last time, he had not been able to fully recover. Now his status in the clan was much worse than before. The attitude of these clansmen towards him naturally became disrespectful. Mao Yao could not take it anymore. In the end, he pushed all the blame to the woman not far away. If it were not for her, he would not have been reduced to such a state today. Shangguanyu should pay back all the torture he had suffered 10 times, 100 times. Seeing the undisguised hatred and resentment in Mao Yao's eyes, Chu Luiyue's originally nervous mood inexplicably relaxed a lot. Anyway, What was the use of being nervous now since she had already thoroughly offended the great phoenix dragon tribe? She might as well face it calmly and see what they could do. Thinking of this, the pressure in Chu Liyue's heart lessened. Her red lips slightly. Elder Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, long time no see. I didn't expect you to still remember me. Mao Yao was so angry that he almost choked. What the hell was that? In Shangguan Yu's **T, in the end? Elder Mao Senior's words. He sneered and clenched his teeth. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth, carrying deep resentment and hatred. Not only do I remember you, but I also remember everything that you've done to me. In other words, he had not forgotten any of the scores between them. Chu Liyue's smile deepened, as if she did not understand the deeper meaning in his words. Thank you for your concern. You. Mao Yao's face was ashen. He finally could not hold back and suddenly stood up. Shangguan Yu, how dare you? Before Chu Liyue could say anything, she heard a calm and dignified voice from beside her. Mao Yao. Mao Yao's expression changed when he heard this voice. Finally, he gritted his teeth and sat down again. However, his eyes were still fixed on Chu Liyue. If eyes could turn into knives, Chu Liyue would have been cut into pieces. Chu Liyue turned her head in surprise. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. His appearance was very ordinary. At a glance, there was nothing special about him. However, he was sitting at the head of the table. His identity was obviously not ordinary. Chu Liyue's heart trembled slightly. This man. Just as she was hesitating, Rong Xiu had already taken a step forward, cupped his fists and bowed politely. Clan leader Mao Yang, I've long heard of your name. Meeting you today, you really live up to your reputation. It was indeed him. Chu Liyue knew this name. Ever since Dumpling had broken through to become a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, she had been paying close attention to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan and read a lot of information about them. In the process, she also learned a lot about the Great Phoenix Dragon. Among them was the current clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon, Mao Yang. Speaking of which, Mao Yang was also an extremely legendary figure. It was rumored that his talent was not high. He was just an ordinary existence in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Then, one day, for some unknown reason, his bloodline power suddenly soared, and he became the top genius of the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Since then, his talent and diligence made him more and more outstanding. In the end, he successfully became the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. There was only a difference of a few decades between him and Yi Zhao. To them, this time gap was very small. Therefore, almost everyone, including themselves, regarded each other as their opponents. The relationship between the two ancient divine beasts was subtle, so it was inevitable that the two clan leaders would be compared. Unfortunately, Mao Yang and Yi Zhao had never really fought, and the number of times they had met could be counted on one hand. It was difficult for everyone to guess who was the stronger one. After seeing Yi Zhao, Chu Liyue couldn't help but secretly compare the two of them in her heart when she saw Mao Yang. They were indeed very different. Yi Zhao was serious and cold, revealing the pride in his bones. As for Mao Yang, his expression was gentle, and he looked much easier to get along with than Yi Zhao. Hearing Rong Xiu's words, he also smiled and said, Everyone says that the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiu, is extraordinarily talented and charming. Today, I see that you are indeed extraordinary. His words were very polite, and his attitude was very calm. However, Chu Liyue secretly frowned in her heart. Although she couldn't tell exactly what it was, she just felt that there was something wrong with this Mao Yang. After all, he was the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. His status was noble and high, so why did he have to be so polite to them? Moreover, this kind of politeness was different from the respect and fear that Nan Yifan had when facing Rong Xiu. It seemed that this was indeed the first time Mao Yang and Rong Xiu had met. In that case, his attitude was even more bizarre. This is Shangguan Yu? Mao Yang's gaze fell on Chu Liyue. His gaze was sharp and tangible, as if he could see through everything. However, he didn't make anyone feel uncomfortable or offended. Chu Liyue became more and more vigilant. This Mao Yang is not simple. He is definitely not as gentle as he looks on the surface. However, these thoughts only flashed through her mind quickly, and she didn't show it on her face. Junior Shangguan Yu greets clan leader Mao Yang. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1731. Chu Liyue bowed politely. Mao Yang's eyes lingered on her for a moment, before he quickly looked away. May I know why did you suddenly visit today? Mao Yang asked tactfully. Everyone present clearly saw that the void above the square had suddenly swayed and collapsed. Then, the two of them had suddenly appeared. One must know that they set up layers of barriers around the Divine Dragon Island. Even their own clansmen couldn't enter and leave at will, let alone humans. However, these two people seemed to have completely ignored those obstacles and directly shattered the void to come here. It was really hard not to be suspicious. It's a long story. Rongxiu smiled, but his expression was still calm. After that, he gave a simple explanation of what had happened in just a few words. Of course, he directly skipped over many of the details. After that, everyone present quieted down with different expressions on their faces. But obviously, most of them were still suspicious. Even Mao Yang had a surprised look on his face. So you're saying that you somehow came here from the God-slaying mound? Rongxiu nodded. And I didn't mean to come here. If we offended you, please forgive us, Patriarch Mao Yang. Looking at his incomparably sincere expression, Mao Yang was speechless. He had thought of many possibilities, but this was the only one he didn't think of. This sounded too strange. But if he didn't experience it personally, how could he say such a reason? Moreover, with the strength of these two people, it was impossible for them to quietly break through their defenses and come in directly. In other words, what Rongxiu said was true. Of course, Mao Yang didn't believe all of it, but he also felt that what Rongxiu said should be partly true. Mao Yang fell into silence. It was almost impossible for outsiders to verify these things. Whether it was true or not, it was all up to them. Rongxiu's status was not low, so obviously they couldn't take his life. However, since they had suddenly come here, they had to bear the punishment that they deserved. After a while, Mao Yang said, Actually, we didn't mean to make things difficult for the two of you. It's just that you interrupted our 1,000 peaks, and even stepped on the jade disc that we use for testing. I'm afraid this debt will have to be settled properly. 1,000 peaks? Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment, before he quickly came to his senses. No wonder. She was wondering why so many people were here. It turned out that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race was holding the 1,000 Summit. The so-called 1,000 Summit was actually similar to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestral worship ceremony. Every 100 years, the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe would hold a 1,000 Peaks Summit to test the innate talents of the younger generation of the tribe. This could be considered one of the biggest ceremonies in their clan, and it was incomparably important to them. Now that she and Rongxiu had interrupted them, it was no wonder that they were so angry. This Mao Yang was really good at self-restraint. He was actually able to say these words so calmly. If it was Yi Zhao suddenly, Chu Liyue's expression froze. A sense of uneasiness quickly surged into her heart. Since this 1,000 Peaks Summit was similar to the ancestral worship ceremony, then, outsiders should not be allowed to casually appear here. She and Rongxiu had gotten into big trouble. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would definitely not let this matter go so easily. And that jade disc? Chu Liyue lowered her head to take another look. Clan leader Mao Yang, this jade disc, Mao Yang said indifferently. Actually, this jade disc isn't considered a top-notch treasure. It's just that our tribe only has this one now. After it's damaged, it's extremely difficult to refine another one that's exactly the same. Chu Liyue's breathing stagnated. Although Mao Yang's tone was very calm, she could also hear the preciousness of this item. It was the only one. And it was a treasure that was specially used for the 1,000 Peaks Summit. And it was crushed by them just like that. If she didn't compensate them properly, she would feel that it wasn't right. However, the two of you didn't do it on purpose. Clan leader, why are you so polite to the two of them? In my opinion, they were clearly doing it on purpose. Mao Yao tried to restrain himself, but in the end, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up again with a furious expression. He raised his finger and pointed at Chu Luyue, gritting his teeth as he said word by word. Especially this Shang Guanyu. They're very sinister and cunning. How can there be such a coincidence in this world? They came directly from the god-slaying tomb thousands of miles away to our divine dragon island. Furthermore, he had coincidentally stepped on the jade disc and shattered it. Everyone nodded in agreement. Although Mao Yao was a little agitated at this moment, what he said was not without reason. This series of events was really too coincidental. It was hard for anyone to believe it. Chu Liyue's lips curled into a cold arc when she heard this. She turned around and stared at Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, you have to have evidence before you speak. Don't you think it's a little too much for you to accuse us without any evidence? If you insist on what you said just now, then, do I have reason to suspect that you're abusing your position to avenge a personal grudge? Just because I won the bet and caused you to be heavily injured, you hold a grudge against me and want to take this opportunity to slander us? Mao Yang's face turned pale. What a glib tongue. When he first met this Shang Guanyu, he already knew how powerful she was. However, that was when he was at Lingxiao College. Now that she was on Divine Dragon Island, their territory, she was still as arrogant as ever. This was ridiculous. Ridiculous. Mao Yao's chest heaved violently. His hand that was pointing at Chu Luyue trembled slightly. Then he waved his sleeves fiercely. Then explain yourself. What's going on? If you can give us an explanation and show us evidence, we'll believe you. Otherwise, you're doing this on purpose. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes and felt a little irritated. She also did not expect that she would actually be sent to this Divine Dragon Island. Did they think she wanted to come? She couldn't wait to cut off all contact with the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. However, it seemed that this had become an extravagant hope. Mao Yao's words are not without reason. In the silence, Mao Yang spoke again. His expression was still gentle, and there was nothing strange about it. His words, however, gradually became sharper. After all, the Thousand Summit is the grandest event of our clan. Because of this, the entire clan had been working tirelessly, so that the 1,000-year summit could be held smoothly. But now, everything has become an illusion. Even if the two of you really didn't mean it, you're not completely without responsibility, right? Of course. Rong Xiu replied calmly. He raised his chin slightly, and his jawline was smooth. There was a smile at the corner of his lips, but there was calmness between his brows. He was just standing there, but his entire body exuded an indescribable noble aura, making people subconsciously look up and submit to him. If we're in the wrong, we'll take responsibility and never shirk responsibility. Digression. Happy Origin Core. Happy first anniversary, Godly Doctor. I hope that everyone will be healthy and happy in the new year. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1732. As soon as he finished speaking, Mao Yao sneered. Bear the responsibility alone? With just you two? What big words. Let's not talk about anything else, just that jade disc alone. Can you compensate us with an identical one? How are you going to bear the responsibility of delaying the Thousand Peaks Summit? Rong Xiu glanced at him, the smile on his lips fading a little. I, Rong Xiu, have always done what I say. There's no need for others to worry about this. Mao Yao's heart felt stifled, and his anger burned even more. This Rong Xiu was not someone to be trifled with. The two of them together could simply infuriate people to death. Mao Yang gave Mao Yao a look. Mao Yao, don't be agitated. Maybe they really have a way. Mao Yao did not dare to disobey his words. He could only snort coldly and swallow the rest of his words. Mao Yang looked at Rong Xiu and Chu Luyue, his eyes sweeping across the two of them. Actually, we don't want to make a big deal out of this matter. After all, it won't be good for either of us. How about this? If you have a way to repair this jade disc within an hour, we'll forget about the broken jade disc. How about it? As soon as he finished speaking, the huge square became even quieter. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the two people in the square. Good wife, suspicion, ridicule. Everyone had different expressions, but in the end, they all had the attitude of watching a joke. Because they all knew very well. In this world, there was absolutely no one who could complete this task within an hour. Even the top craftsmen of the human race could not do it, let alone these two people. Is Patriarch Mao Yang's words true? Rong Xiu seemed to be unaware of the surrounding gazes as he asked faintly. Mao Yang nodded. Of course. In front of so many people. Every word he said was carefully considered. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. Good. Since that's the case then, I'll have to ask you and everyone else to wait for an hour for now. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. What did Rong Xiu mean by this? Could it be that he could really restore the jade disc to its original state within an hour? Where did his confidence come from? Chu Liyue stepped forward and held his hand. Rong Xiu turned around and looked at her with a smile. Their eyes met. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly calmed down. Rong Xiu could do it. Even if no one believed it, she believed it. Rong Xiu indeed had such an ability. Then, Rong Xiu walked to the side and picked up the broken plate. You lend me something. Chu Liyue was stunned. What? Rong Xiu said. The corpse of the great phoenix dragon. The corners of Chu Liyue's eyes twitched. What did Rong Xiu want to do with this thing? Her eyes unconsciously fell on the jade plate that had shattered into several pieces, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in her heart. This was Divine Dragon Island. It was one thing for them to suddenly appear here, but if they took out the corpse in front of so many people, wouldn't they be looking for trouble? However, looking at Rong Xiu's calm and composed appearance, Chu Liyue only moved her lips, but in the end she nodded. With a flick of her wrist, a stream of light flashed. Then, a long skeleton appeared in Chu Liyue's hand. The skeleton was translucent and glowed with a jade-like luster. However, the moment this thing appeared, the entire square was in an uproar. They were all great phoenix dragons, so they were naturally familiar with the aura of this skeleton. Sheng Guanyu, how dare you? Mao Yao's eyes widened in anger as he reprimanded angrily. Even Mao Yang's eyes, which had always been gentle, turned cold at this time. Sheng Guanyu, Rong Xiu, what are you trying to do? His voice was low and dignified, and every word fell into the ears like a clap of thunder. Chu Liyue's heart trembled, and the force in her body instantly began to surge. Rong Xiu held her hand. A gentle and majestic aura flowed into her body, quickly calming the force in her body. Chu Liyue exhaled softly. Although her strength had improved, she was still a high god. Facing a top expert like Mao Yang, she was naturally no match for him. Rong Xiu took the corpse in his hand, then raised his eyes and looked at Mao Yang. There was a faint smile on his noble and devilish face, and his voice was lazy and carried a hint of indifference. Clan leader Mao Yang, why are you so nervous? I'm just borrowing this corpse to repair the jade disc. He didn't seem to care at all, but every word he said struck at the heart of Mao Yang and the others. Of course, they knew that Sheng Guanyu had the corpse of one of their clansmen with her. Moreover, she had used this corpse to reconstruct the physical body of her contracted divine beast. If not for this, Mao Yao would not have barged into Lingxiao College and questioned her. Unfortunately, the outcome of that incident was not very good. Mao Yao lost the bet, and at the same time, he lost the right to continue asking for the corpse. This was a large part of the reason why the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan's attitude towards Mao Yao had changed. If the corpse was not taken out, it would be fine. They could still put on a show of politeness. But now the corpse was right in front of them. How could they tolerate this? Mao Yang was secretly shocked when he saw that Rong Xiu easily neutralized his coercion. He did not use his full strength just now. He only wanted to put some pressure on them, but he still used 50% of his strength. An ordinary high god expert would definitely not be able to withstand it. However, this did not seem to cause any trouble for Rong Xiu at all. Rong Xiu's strength seemed to be stronger than the rumors. Mao Yang said coldly, "But this is the corpse of one of our clansmen. How can you deal with it so casually?" This was a slap to the Great Phoenix Dragon clan's face in public. Chu Liuya suddenly laughed. Clan leader Mao Yang. Although this corpse does belong to a senior of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, it's already mine. It's not up to others to decide what I want to do with it, right? This was something he had told Elder Mao Yao back then. Elder Mao Yao, don't you think so? Mao Yao, who was still burning with anger, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat when he heard this. At this moment, he clearly felt countless gazes filled with reproach and resentment fall on him. Mao Yao stammered and tried to appear fierce. What nonsense are you talking about? When did we say that in the bet? Chu Liuya said with a smile. It seems that you're really forgetful. At that time, we clearly agreed that after I won the bet, this corpse would belong to me, and the Great Phoenix Dragon clan would not pursue it anymore. This naturally means that you no longer have any right to interfere with this matter. There are many witnesses that day. Elder Mao Yao, do you want me to invite a few of them over? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1733. Mao Yao was speechless. Although Chu Liuyue's words were unpleasant to hear, it was the truth. Since she had won the bet that day, the skeleton belonged to her. Naturally, it was up to her to decide how to deal with it. Even if it was the skeleton of their Great Phoenix Dragon clan, they still had no right to interfere. At the end of the day, the responsibility for this matter still fell on his head. Whispers came from the surroundings. Elder Mao Yao actually has the nerve to stand up and speak. If he wasn't too incompetent that day and lost the bet, why would we be suffering Shengguan Yu's anger for no reason? That's right. Because of a personal mistake, the skeleton of a clansman fell into the hands of others and can't be recovered. This is a big mistake. However, Elder Mao Yao hasn't been punished yet. I really don't know what the clan leader is thinking. Why not? Didn't you see that the clan leader didn't let Elder Mao Yao participate in the Thousand Summit this time? You should know that Elder Mao Yao was an important figure in the previous Thousand Peaks. How can this be? In all these years, there has never been a case where a clansman's skeleton has fallen outside, and we have no right to recover it. If not for Elder Mao Yao's negligence this time, we wouldn't have to be so sullen. If I were him, I wouldn't have the face to come to the Thousand Summit today. All kinds of discussions entered Mao Yao's ears one after another, causing his face to turn green and extremely embarrassed. He wished he could find a hole to hide in. He knew that this matter would have a big impact on him, but he wouldn't say it out loud. Even the clan leader Mao Yang didn't reprimand him harshly. He just quietly distributed the power in his hands. Although Mao Yao felt terrible, he knew that this was the last bit of face left for him. As time passed, this matter would naturally fade away. However, he didn't expect Shengguan Yu and Rong Xiu to come. Furthermore, he had taken out the skeleton right in front of them. Wasn't this exposing his background in front of everyone? When these clansmen saw the skeleton, they clearly didn't intend to continue enduring. Mao Yao didn't need to think to know that his days in the clan would be even more difficult. And if Rong Xiu did something to the skeleton, Mao Yao felt that he would become the sinner of the entire race. He almost couldn't catch his breath. His body swayed, and his face was extremely pale. Chu Liuya asked with concern, Elder Mao Yao, your complexion doesn't look too good. Could it be that you haven't fully recovered from your previous injuries? As she spoke, she frowned slightly and revealed a look of confusion. That shouldn't be the case. I was quite restrained back then. Mao Yao's chest tightened, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Restrain? What did she mean by that? Could it be that she had been merciful to him back then? What would everyone think if they heard this? Yu. Miao Yao was infuriated. This Shengguan Yu is clearly doing this on purpose. Chu Liuyue's smile was gentle and sincere. Do you want to rest first? I see that Patriarch Mao Yang and the others are all here. Even if you leave for a while, it won't have much of an impact, right? Mao Yao's vision turned black, and his body began to tremble. Mao Yang frowned. Mao Yao's appearance was simply too embarrassing. If it weren't for his seniority and his contributions to the clan, he would have been severely held accountable for the skeleton's incident this time. He originally thought that after experiencing this setback, Mao Yao would restrain himself a little. He didn't expect that not only did he not improve at all, he even became even more impatient. Mao Yang lowered his eyes, hiding the cold light in his eyes. Patriarch Mao Yang, don't worry. I want to use these bones to repair the jade disc, but I have no intention of destroying it, Rongxiu said with a faint smile. This was the Divine Dragon Island, and he wouldn't go so far as to completely offend the Great Phoenix Dragon clan here. Hearing this, Mao Yang's tense face finally relaxed a little. He stared at Rongxiu for a while, and finally nodded. Then please. Within the ruins of God, the originally gloomy and oppressive pressure seemed to have lessened by quite a bit. Dumpling and the rest headed outside at an extremely fast speed. Even the weakest, Chu Ning, could barely keep up with the rest after borrowing Shangguan Jing's divine artifact. Not long after, they arrived at the border of the ruins of God and stood in front of the Scarlet Soul Forest again. With their previous experience, and the fact that there were no outsiders to disturb them, they passed through very smoothly this time. In the evening, the group walked out of the Scarlet Soul Forest and completely left the ruins of God. When they took the last step, Shangguan Jing couldn't help but look back. It was already evening, and the afterglow of the setting sun covered the entire Scarlet Soul Forest with a faint layer of golden light. Black trees stood in the forest, and the dark red leaves swayed in the wind. He had never thought that he would actually come here again and completely resolve the grudge between him and Yu Hongshan. He wondered where Yu was now and whether she was safe. At that thought, he retracted his gaze and looked at Dumpling. He wasn't the only one. Everyone else present was also waiting for Dumpling. Out of all of them, she was the only one who could lead them to Rongxiu and his wife. Dumpling crossed her arms and rested her chin on one hand, deep in thought. After a while, she raised her chubby little hand and pointed in a certain direction. Over there. Without hesitation, they immediately followed Tuanzi and ran forward. Time passed slowly, and it seemed to be especially unbearable. But fortunately, Dumpling and Chu Luiyue had always been sensing each other. This also proved that at the very least, Chu Luiyue should still be safe at this time. And the closer they got, the stronger Dumpling's sensing ability became. The distance between the two parties was obviously shrinking. This made everyone feel more at ease. However, gradually, Yizhao and Elder Yu both felt that something was amiss. Elder Yu lowered his head to look. At this moment, they were passing by a wasteland. The terrain here was a little special. On the yellow wasteland, there were ravines crisscrossing. Looking down from the sky, these ravines of varying depths stretched across the boundless wasteland, grand and desolate. This place, Elder Yu finally couldn't help but move to Yizhao's side and whisper, "Clan leader, don't you think this place seems a little strange? Ordinary wastelands don't have such scenery." In his impression, there seemed to be only one place in the Divine Ruins world that looked like this. Yizhao seemed to have guessed what he was thinking and nodded affirmatively. "You're right. This is indeed the 13 slopes." Although Elder Yu had already expected this, he was still shocked when he heard such an affirmative answer. The so-called 13 slopes referred to this wasteland. It was said that 10,000 years ago, 13 ancestors of the Great Phoenix Dragon had passed away here together. After they died, the energy of heaven and earth here shook, causing this wasteland to become what it was today. Therefore, the descendants called it the 13 slopes. But the key point was, this was the territory of the Great Phoenix Dragon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1734. How did we end up here? Elder Yu's expression froze, and he was a little worried. The relationship between the two ancient divine beast clans had always been very subtle. They were on opposite sides, but they had never really fought. They were polite, but they were not willing to submit to each other. They had been fighting openly and secretly for many years. However, there was always an unwritten rule between them. They would never cause trouble in each other's territory. This was the bottom line of both sides. Once someone broke it, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. If those old guys from the Great Phoenix Dragon knew that they were here, there would be a lot of trouble. This was also one of the reasons why Elder EU felt uneasy. He looked up at Dumpling, who was in front of him. She seemed to be unaware and still looked excited. If we continue forward, I'm afraid we will reach Divine Dragon Island, right? Elder EU was very worried. He had never been to Divine Dragon Island, but they had already arrived at the 13th slope. He knew that the Great Phoenix Dragon's nest was in front of them. Yijiao's brows moved slightly. The 13th slope is only considered the periphery of Divine Dragon Island. It's not considered a violation of the agreement. However, we can't go any further. Especially when he had come here with EU. If the Great Phoenix Dragon and the others knew about this, who knew what they would say about them? Dumpling. Yijiao suddenly called out to Dumpling. Dumpling stopped and turned back, only to see Yijiao and Elder EU standing on the spot. Grandpa Leader, what's wrong? Dumpling asked in confusion. Shangguan Jing and the others also stopped and turned back when they heard the commotion. Yijiao stared at Dumpling for a while and asked, Dumpling, are you sure that Shangguan Yu is in front? Dumpling nodded in confusion. Yes. Hadn't everyone been following her all this time? Why did Grandpa Leader suddenly ask about this? Yijiao paused. Shangguan Jing saw that his expression was a little strange, and could not help but ask. Leader Yijiao, is there something wrong? Yijiao shook his head. It's nothing. However, EU and I are unable to continue forward. We can only send Dumpling here. Shangguan Jing and the others were shocked. Dumpling also widened her eyes and asked in puzzlement, What are you talking about? Grandpa Patriarch, why? Yijiao raised his hand and pointed downwards. This is the 13 slopes. It's considered the territory of the Great Phoenix Dragon race. If they passed through here, it was very likely that the Divine Dragon Island would be in front of them. EU and I have special statuses. Naturally, we can't go further in. When he said that, everyone looked at each other. If that was the case, then there was really no other way. Dumpling pursed her lips in disappointment and reluctance. Although she hadn't spent a lot of time with Grandpa Patriarch and Grandpa Fifth Elder, she could feel that they were genuinely good to her. Now that they were suddenly separated, she naturally felt a little upset. She scratched her hair bun. When Dumpling finds IU, I'll go back to visit you and Grandpa Fifth Elder. Yijiao looked at her sincere and clean big eyes, as well as her solemn vow, and his heart warmed. Okay, then Grandpa Patriarch will wait for you. Elder EU was so touched that tears welled up in his eyes. He hurriedly said, Me too, me too. Grandpa Fifth Elder will definitely wait for you. If you want to see Grandpa Fifth Elder, just send a message over. No matter where Dumpling is, Grandpa Fifth Elder will definitely be at your beck and call. His words finally made Dumpling burst with joy, and a bright smile bloomed on her face again. It's a deal. After that, Yijiao and Elder EU coaxed Dumpling for a while more before they really bade farewell, and watched Dumpling and the others leave. Looking at Dumpling's gradually disappearing figure, Elder EU couldn't help but ask, Patriarch, can you really be at ease? After all, Dumpling is the young lord. Once she enters Divine Dragon Island, her aura will definitely be detected. What if those people from Divine Dragon Island make things difficult for Dumpling? Yijiao's face was expressionless. We have to be at ease even if we can't. If we really go, things will only become more troublesome. Therefore, they could only make such a choice. As long as Dumpling goes, they will definitely make things difficult for her. Fortunately, Dumpling is still young, and she has a contractual relationship with Shangguan Yu. If she wants to go to Shanghai Yu, there is no better reason than that. Even if they want to do something to Dumpling, they have to think of a suitable reason to do so. Originally, they had been brooding over the fact that Dumpling had a contractual relationship with Shangguan Yu. However, from the looks of it today, it wasn't all bad. Elder EU's heart finally calmed down a little. Now we can only hope that everything goes well for Dumpling and the others. Yijiao was silent for a moment before he spoke again. That Rong Xiao, do you know what his background is? Elder EU didn't expect him to suddenly bring this up. After being stunned for a moment, he said, Don't you already know this? He is the saint of Yuntian Tower. Yijiao shook his head. What I mean is, Other identities. Elder EU suddenly thought of something. Are you suspicious of Rong Xiu because of Nan Yifan's reaction earlier? Yi Zhao nodded. There was nothing to deny about this. He did feel that Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rong Xiu was very strange. The Nan family's power was stronger than Yuntian Tower. As the head of the family, Nan Yifan had no reason to be so afraid of Rong Xiu. I really don't know. Rong Xiu has been famous in Yuntian Tower for the past few years, but I don't think I've heard that he has any other background other than being the saint of Yuntian Tower. Why don't I go back and look into it? Elder EU asked tentatively. Yi Zhao was about to nod when he suddenly paused, as if he was hesitating about something. After pondering for a long time, he waved his hand. Forget it. Since he didn't say anything, we don't have to deliberately inquire. These things will naturally be known when it's time to know. He took one last look in the direction where Dumpling and the others left. Those figures had completely disappeared from his sight. A breeze blew, fluttering the corners of the two's clothes. Yi Zhao lowered his eyes, hiding the emotions in his eyes, and turned around. It's time for us to go back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1735. Divine Dragon Island. The square in front of the Great Void Temple was completely silent. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the two figures standing in the middle. Jealousy, suspicion, indifference. Even without looking up, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the hostility in the eyes of the surrounding people. She lifted her eyes slightly and looked at Rong Xiu in front of her. He was sitting cross-legged with a calm expression. It was as if the gazes of the surrounding people could not affect him at all. The broken jade plate was placed in front of him. As for his hand, it was holding onto the skeleton. He waved his wrist gently, and the skeleton flew up lightly and floated quietly in front of him. Then, a cluster of golden flames suddenly surged out from Rong Xiu's hand. Boom! The flames were bright and scorching, jumping around happily like fairies. Rong Xiu's mind moved, and the cluster of flames flew out from his hand and landed on one end of the skeleton. Seeing this scene, the crowd could not help but become restless. The corners of Chu Liyue's eyes twitched violently, burning the skeleton of their clansman in front of the great phoenix dragon. Only Rong Xiu would do such a thing. Mao Yang's dignified eyes quickly scanned the crowd. The restless voices quickly calmed down. However, those pairs of eyes that were surging with waves clearly indicated that their hearts were far from as calm as they appeared on the surface. Chu Liyue's brows twitched slightly, and she quickly glanced at Mao Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table. She had long heard that Mao Yang was highly respected in the clan. Today, she saw that he was indeed worthy of his reputation. Although he looked kind and polite, if he did not use ruthless methods, he would not have been able to sit firmly in the position of clan leader. Almost at the instant Chu Liyue looked over, Mao Yang was acutely aware of this point, and directly looked over. The two of them looked at each other. In the silence, there seemed to be an undercurrent surging. Chu Liyue's lips curled slightly, and revealed a polite smile. Then she calmly looked away. After a short while the feeling of having a knife on his back disappeared. She heaved a sigh of relief, and fixed her eyes on Rong Xiu. The cluster of golden flames burned from one end of the skeleton, and gradually spread to the other end. Wherever it passed, the skeleton seemed to become more sparkling and translucent. She could vaguely see a small amount of transparent liquid flowing slowly inside. A majestic aura spread out from the skeleton. A trace of surprise flashed across Chu Liyue's heart. Although she had only used 2 wing bones when she reconstructed Zichen's body, she had basically extracted all the bloodline energy in the skeleton. She had originally thought that she had extracted the purest power of the skeleton's bloodline. But now, it seemed that there was still a remnant of the bloodline power of the skeleton. More importantly, Rong Xiu had so easily dug out the power hidden in every inch of the skeleton. This was something that even Chu Liyue could not do. Chu Liyue stared at the burning golden flames. She had always known that the golden flames on Rong Xiu's body were not ordinary, but she had never thought about it carefully before. But now she suddenly felt a little curious, because she realized that the power of the flames did not seem to be inferior to hers. After all, she could summon two flames. One was the scarlet gold flame of the scarlet gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was the transparent karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron. These two flames were extraordinarily powerful, not to mention that they were supported by the power of the transparent water droplet in her body. No, it should be called a zither score. After experiencing those things in the god-slaying mound, she realized that this thing on her was a precious treasure. The golden flames on Rongxiu's body were not inferior in comparison. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about these questions, the golden flames had already burned to the other end of the skeleton. Rongxiu raised his hand, and the flames silently separated from the skeleton. At the same time, the transparent liquid in the skeleton slowly seeped out and condensed into a ball the size of a longan. This ball was surrounded and roasted by the golden flames. Gradually, a shadow seemed to emerge from it. Chu Luiyue stood closer, so she could see it more clearly than the others. At first, the shadow was just a blurry ball, but gradually, as time passed and the golden flames condensed, the shadow became clearer and clearer. Finally, at a certain moment, the shadow revealed its true appearance. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. It was actually a dragon, a great phoenix dragon. Although it was very small, Chu Luiyue could tell at first glance that it was indeed a great phoenix dragon. Roar! A deep and deep dragon roar resounded through the world. The pressure was heavy, covering the sky and the earth. Chu Luiyue was shocked. The onlookers were also shocked. They did not expect Rongxiu to be able to refine the remaining bloodline power. Then Rongxiu flicked his finger. The golden flames wrapped around it and quickly pounced on the broken jade disc. The flames were bright, blazing. It instantly surrounded the jade disc. Almost at the same time, the great phoenix dragon's shadow in the water droplet began to move at an even faster speed. Then bang! A slight cracking sound could be heard. The water droplet turned into countless tiny water droplets and splashed on the jade disc. It was as if there was an invisible thread that began to string the broken pieces together perfectly. Under the strong and shocking dragon's might, the cracks on the jade disc began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. The golden flames burned even more fiercely. Vaguely, Chu Luiyue saw that the cracks on the jade disc were disappearing. Not long after, Rongxiu's bony finger tapped lightly. The golden flames flew back instantly. A jade disc floated quietly in the air. All the cracks on it had disappeared. It was as clean as new and flawless. Rongxiu stood up and kept the jade disc in his hand. Then, he raised his eyes and looked at Mao Yang. He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. Clan leader Mao Yang, I did not disappoint you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1736. The entire place was dead silent. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the stiff and cold atmosphere. Impossible. There must be something fishy going on. Rongxiu glanced sideways with an indifferent expression. Elder Mao Yao, you're not in good health, so you shouldn't be so agitated, right? If you accidentally faint, whose fault is it? Mao Yao was furious. He finally saw through it. These two people were sharper than the other. If he spoke a few more words with them, he might die from anger. Mao Yao took a deep breath and finally realized something. He was no match for the two of them in a war of words. Thus, he stopped arguing with Rongxiu and turned to look at Mao Yang. Patriarch, others may not know, but you know it best. That jade disc is a treasure of our clan. Once it shatters, it can't be repaired within an hour. Rongxiu must have used some kind of trick to make it look as good as new on the surface. You mustn't be fooled by him. Chu Luiyue said with a smile that was not a smile. Oh, Elder Mao Yao, you mean? Patriarch Mao Yang raised this condition to deliberately make things difficult for us? Mao Yao was speechless. You. Enough. Mao Yang stood up, and his voice was finally tinged with anger. He frowned and looked at Mao Yao. Whether it's true or not, I will personally check it. Elder Mao Yao doesn't need to worry about it. He really didn't know what was wrong with Mao Yao. Ever since the failure in Shangguanyu, he seemed to have become impulsive and irritable. He couldn't do anything right, but he was good at spoiling things. Mao Yao also felt as if he was possessed. It was as if as long as those two were involved, he would become irrational and even make mistakes. His situation in the clan was already difficult enough. If this continued, it would be a problem if he could continue to stay in the clan. His face was pale, and he swallowed the rest of his words with an embarrassed expression. Mao Yang looked at Rongxiao. I wonder if you can let me take a look at this thing? Rongxiao nodded. Of course. As he spoke, he casually tossed it into the air. The jade disc flew towards Mao Yang. Mao Yang took the item and glanced at Rongxiao. The young man was dressed in a snow-white robe. His posture was as straight as a pine tree, and his expression was calm and composed. He seemed to be very confident. Mao Yang frowned, and then he looked at the jade disc in his hand and carefully observed it. This was a treasure of their clan. As the clan leader, he was naturally the most familiar with it. The crowd quieted down again. Everyone focused their attention and looked at Mao Yang, waiting for his conclusion. In fact, most people didn't quite believe it. Their thoughts were similar to Mao Yao's. They all felt that Rongxiao must have used some special method to make it look exactly the same from the outside. Rongxiao did not seem to care about this. He handed the skeleton to Chu Luyue and said with a smile, Many thanks you, Chu Luyue took the item and smiled. Her eyes flickered, and there was a fine but bright light in her eyes. In fact, other than providing this skeleton, she did not help him with anything else. In the end, it was Rongxiao himself who was powerful enough. If it was someone else, it would be difficult to do so. After a while, Mao Yang raised his head and looked at Rongxiao with a complicated gaze. Everyone's hearts were also in suspense. Clan leader's expression is not very good. I think there's something wrong with that thing. It's all expected. From the beginning to the end, Rongxiao only used half the time. It's impossible to completely repair the jade disc in such a short time. I want to see if they can still be so calm later. Low murmurs of discussion could be heard from both sides. Rongxiao did not seem to hear it. With a smile on his lips, he looked at Mao Yang and asked, Clan leader Mao Yang, how is it? His voice was low and pleasing to the ear, and it carried a calming force. Mao Yang was silent for a while before he said, This jade disc has indeed been restored to its original state. As soon as his words fell, everyone was shocked. The huge square was instantly dead silent. Almost everyone's expression froze on their faces. For a moment, they did not know how to react. Clan leader said, It had indeed been restored to its original state? Didn't that mean that Rongxiao really only used half the time to complete their request? No. How did he do it? Rongxiao's smile deepened. It's indeed not easy to do this. But fortunately, Yuer has the skeleton of a great phoenix dragon. With the help of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline power, repairing the jade disc will naturally be much easier. This jade disc belonged to them in the first place. What else was more suitable than their own bloodline power to do this? All in all I did was transfer the bloodline power in the skeleton to the jade disc. This way, it shouldn't be considered an offense to clan leader Mao Yang, right? Rongxiao raised his eyebrows. From the beginning, he had said that he wouldn't damage the skeleton at all. Now he could be considered to have done what he said. His words caused everyone to fall silent. These words didn't seem to be wrong. Originally, they thought that if Rongxiao really did something, they could use this against him. However, what he did this time was indeed extremely benevolent, and there was no place to attack. This made people unable to find a reason to scold him, even if they wanted to. Mao Yang was actually holding back a bellyful of anger. Although the jade disc had been perfectly restored, he had only wanted to take this opportunity to make things difficult for the two of them. Who would have thought that Rongxiao would actually do it? Mao Yang only felt as if he had punched cotton, and his entire person was extremely sullen. However, his self-restraint was extremely good. Even if his emotions were surging in his heart, his face was still expressionless. He sighed softly. The holy son of the Yintian Tower is indeed as powerful as the rumors say. No, it should be said that the outside world still underestimated you. Although this child was young, his thoughts were deep. They had been here for so long, but he couldn't guess Rong Xiu's thoughts at all. Moreover, he faintly felt that Rong Xiu should have other trump cards. This person, I'm afraid it's not easy to deal with. Rong Xiu gladly accepted Mao Yang's insincere praise. You flatter me. In fact, I just wanted to turn today's matter into a small matter, and a small matter into nothing. We damaged this jade disc, so it's only right to repair it and compensate. He paused. Now that the jade disc has been restored, and we have already apologized before then, you and I can leave now, right? Mao Yang narrowed his eyes. The two of them looked at each other. In an instant, sparks flew. The two sides' strength clashed silently. Mao Yang handed the jade disc to an elder next to him and said slowly, I'm afraid this will be a little difficult. Rong Xiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and the smile on the corner of his lips was stained with a layer of frost. Oh, digression. The Xiaoxiang coin's reward for the first day of New Year's Day has been issued, the list of December's comments, and the 3 days of New Year's Day's comments will be announced after the event. Speaking of which, Dumpling and Debao are so good-looking, I want to flood the surrounding comments section. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1737. What do you mean, clan leader Mao Yang? Rong Xiu asked faintly. Mao Yang had one hand behind his back, and his expression was still calm and gentle. However, at this moment, in the eyes of Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu, his face became stiff and cold. Don't misunderstand. We definitely didn't mean to cause trouble for you. We're all very happy and gratified that the jade disc has been repaired. It's just that the matter isn't over yet, so I'm afraid we can't let you two leave for the time being. He raised his chin slightly, and there was a hint of authority in his voice. Other than this jade disc, it's also true that the two of you appeared out of nowhere and interrupted our 1,000 peaks. More importantly, for 10,000 years, no human has ever taken a step into Divine Dragon Island. However, not only did the two of you come today, but you also barged into the Great Void Temple. This debt, I'm afraid we still have to settle it properly. Chu Luyue suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Mao Yang's eyes darkened. Shangguanyu, what are you laughing at? Halfway through his words, he was suddenly interrupted. He hadn't had such an experience for many years. Therefore, at this moment, Chu Luyue's laughter made him feel very unhappy. Chu Luyue blinked. No, I was just thinking that since you didn't want to let us leave so easily from the beginning, then there's no need to say these complicated and lengthy pleasantries, is there? No matter whether Rong Xiu succeeded or failed, they wouldn't let it go. After all, they didn't plan to let Rong Xiu do this from the beginning. Unfortunately, they underestimated Rong Xiu. Therefore, at this time, they could only use such words to forcefully stop them. Mao Yang didn't expect Chu Luyue to be so straightforward, and finally, his face couldn't hold it anymore. He stared at Chu Luyue for a while, and then suddenly laughed, but there was no smile on his face. You're in the wrong in this matter. Why now don't we even have the right to pursue responsibility? Chu Luyue's smile didn't change, and her eyes curved. Of course. What I mean is, if you have any other conditions, just say them all. Our time is precious, so let's get straight to the point. Mao Yang's hands in his sleeves. He finally realized that Shangguanyu didn't play by the rules. Those things were indeed of no use to her. Rong Xiu, who was at the side, was clearly on her side. These two people. It's really not easy. After thinking of this point, Mao Yang became much more. He pondered for a moment and said, let's not beats. If you want to leave this place, it's simple. Erase all memories related to this place. Anything related to the Divine Dragon Island must not be taken out by them. Rong Xiu squinted his eyes. A cold smile appeared on Chu Luyue's lips. She knew it wouldn't be over so easily. What do you mean, clan leader Mao Yang? Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows slightly. These memories belong to us. How do you want to erase them? Mao Yang's expression was indifferent. We have our own ways. You just have to do as we say. Chu Luyue sneered in her heart. It's easy to say. Isn't this the same as handing our lives over to them? Only a fool would agree. Rongxiu said. Clan leader Mao Yang, we can't agree to your request. Mao Yang had expected such an answer from the two of them. His expression didn't change, and his attitude was firm. Actually, we don't want to do this, but there's really no other way. It's fine if you don't agree. When you think it through and are willing to agree to this condition, we'll let you go. Rongxiu's aura instantly became dangerous. Clan leader Mao Yang, do you mean that if we don't agree, we'll be trapped here forever? Mao Yang seemed to chuckle. Although the Great Phoenix Dragon clan rarely interacts with the human race, this is not a difficult matter for us. His words didn't hide his arrogance at all. This was the confidence of an ancient divine beast. Divine Dragon Island was their territory. Wasn't it a piece of cake to deal with two humans? If it weren't for the fact that Rongxiu and Rongxiu had an extraordinary status in the Divine Ruins world, they wouldn't have wasted so much time and energy. Therefore, to Mao Yang and the people of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, their actions were already quite restrained and polite. Both sides were in a stalemate. The air was cold and silent. At this moment, a person walked over quickly with a nervous expression. Clan leader. Outside Divine Dragon Island, a few humans were approaching. Mao Yang frowned slightly. For this kind of matter, you can just deal with it according to the usual rules. Why do you need to interfere? Under normal circumstances, very few humans would come here. On one hand, they didn't dare to. On the other hand, there were very few people who knew the location of Divine Dragon Island. Occasionally, some people would accidentally come here, and the guards below would basically chase them away. If there were any daring people, they would just kill them. Logically speaking, this kind of matter shouldn't alarm clan leader Mao Yang. The guard who came to report instantly broke out in cold sweat. How could he not know these rules? But the key point was, the people who came this time were not ordinary. Moreover, clan leader, among those people, there seems to be a crimson gold sky phoenix. Mao Yang's expression turned stern. What did you say? Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, and he turned around to look. That description really sounded like. Everyone in the square also looked at each other and became restless. It can't be. There's actually a crimson gold sky phoenix, so daring to barge into Divine Dragon Island? Could it be that they're courting death? We don't have much contact with them, and we won't easily step into their territory. What's going on today? What's wrong with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Or, are they deliberately looking for trouble? Everyone was discussing animatedly. Obviously, the arrival of this Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix had caused quite a stir in their hearts. It wasn't fear, but vigilance and suspicion. The two clans had always maintained a delicate balance, and whoever wanted to break it would have to pay a huge price. Mao Yang said in a deep voice, "What's going on? Tell me in detail." That person hurriedly bowed and recounted the matter in detail. Mao Yang and everyone else's expression changed again and again. You're saying that the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix is a little girl? That person lowered his head even more, and his whole body was covered in cold sweat. I'm not sure, but the aura of that girl is undoubtedly that of a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. How is this possible? The two great ancient divine beasts had to reach adulthood before they could transform into human form. Suddenly, Mao Yang thought of something, and his gaze turned to Chu Liyue. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1738. He recalled that he had indeed received some news before. When Shang Guanyu left the Phoenix God Mountain, he brought a 3 or 4-year-old girl with him. At that time, he had thought about it for a long time, but he still couldn't get an answer. But now a ridiculous and bold guess appeared in Mao Yang's mind. A look of deep shock flashed across his eyes. Could it be? Looks like Dumpling is here. Chu Liyue's lips curled up slightly. The ones who came with Dumpling should be Taizu, Master and Father. Their movements were really fast. Chu Liyue's heart, which was originally hanging in the air, was half relieved. Originally, she was still worried about them. Now that she heard that they were here, she naturally felt more at ease. On second thought, She guessed that Yi Zhao and Elder Yi shouldn't have come together. Otherwise, the Divine Dragon Island would have been in chaos. After all, those two had special identities, so this was the most suitable choice. Hearing Chu Liuyue's words, Mao Yang's heart sank. As expected, that so-called 3- or 4-year-old girl was definitely the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix that Shang Guanyu had contracted. They went to the Phoenix God Mountain. Not only did they not receive any punishment, they even helped the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix transform into a human form. Mao Yang's mind raced, and his face turned gloomy. All these years, he had never heard of a young ancient divine beast that could successfully transform into a human form. How did that little girl do it? The biggest possibility was that the power of her bloodline was extremely powerful. But as for how outstanding it was, even Mao Yang didn't dare to be sure. After all, such a thing had never happened in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. This made him feel bewildered and aggrieved. At the same time, it also made him even more puzzled. Shang Guanyu was here, but that Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and a few other humans came over in such a short period of time. It was very likely that there was a contract between them. But how was that possible? Yi Zhao definitely wouldn't agree. He had always been prejudiced against humans, and he would even despise them if they spoke an extra word. How could he allow his people to maintain a contract with Shang Guanyu? Mao Yang suppressed the many emotions in his heart, but his expression did not change. Are you certain that there is only one Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? If someone had secretly followed them here, that person nodded and cautiously said, "This subordinate has already investigated carefully. There are no traces or auras of other Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenixes in the vicinity of Divine Dragon Island." Furthermore, she had transformed into the appearance of a little girl. The appearance of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix was already enough to shock them. When they saw that she was only 3 or 4 years old, their jaws almost dropped in shock. Only then did he return to report in a fluster. Mao Yang fell silent. Chu Liyue smiled. "Clan leader Mao Yang, Dumpling and the others have personally come to take us back. Are you still not going to let them go?" Mao Yang gave her a deep look. Ever since Mao Yao suffered a loss at the hands of this woman, he knew that she was not a simple person. At that time, when he heard that she had left Phoenix Mountain unscathed, he was even more determined. It was just that. Only now did he realize that he had still underestimated her. This Shang Guanyu looked very young. Her eyes were clear and clean, and she always had a smile on her face. In fact, she was very thoughtful and had many secrets hidden in her body. I can't underestimate her. Mao Yang thought so and said indifferently, "It's their business that they are here. As for whether to let you go, I've already made it very clear just now. You can think about it yourselves." Although his voice was calm, his attitude was very firm. It was obvious that he would not change his previous suggestion. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. Mao Yang looked at the person who reported the news. "Go back to them and tell them that the clan is holding the 1000 Summit. Everyone is busy, and it's not convenient to entertain them." If it had been anyone else from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan who came rashly, he would not have been so polite. However, the one who came was Shang Guanyu's contracted magical beast. Moreover, she seemed to be very young. If he used force and word got out, outsiders would probably say that he was bullying a child. Therefore, after thinking about it, Mao Yang decided to just shut them out. Yes, after receiving the order, the person quickly left. However, the crowd still had different expressions on their faces. Even Mao Yang did not understand the reason behind this, let alone them. In fact, they really wanted to find out what was going on. Mao Yang raised his hand. "Men, please go to 7 Lotus Mountain to rest. I'm afraid you two will have to suffer during this period of time. When you think it through, we can continue the discussion. It's the same." As soon as he finished speaking, 2 tall men walked up from the side. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. They were going to put them under house arrest. Just as she was about to say something, Rong Xiu's finger suddenly brushed across her palm. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She turned her head to look. Rong Xiu's calm and deep eyes were clear. She could not see anything wrong with them. She swallowed the rest of her words. Rongxiu looked at Mao Yang and smiled faintly. Then I'll have to impose on you for this period of time. Mao Yang's chest tightened. Rongxiu did not seem to care about his threats at all. He even wanted to enjoy himself here as a guest. Mao Yang felt a little disgusted. Whether it was Rongxiu or Shang Guanyu, they gave him a feeling that he could not control them. This made him very unhappy. He snorted coldly. I hope you two can think it through soon. After all, there are still people waiting for you outside. Outside Divine Dragon Island, Dumpling and the others finally found the place after a long journey. At this time, they were standing on a long and seemingly endless coast. In front of them was an endless dark blue sea. There was a huge barrier where the sky and the earth met. The pressure was very strong. Needless to say, that was Divine Dragon Island. Dumpling looked over from time to time. Shangguan Jing and the others looked a little serious. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to get people from Divine Dragon Island. At this time, a figure flew out of the barrier. They were shocked. They immediately became nervous. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.